Welcome to the regular meeting of the Morris Township Planning Board, May 16th, 2022. Please take notice that in order to comply with the executive orders signed by the governor and in an effort to follow best practices recommended by the CDC, the regular meeting of the Township of Morris Planning Board is being held remotely via Zoom today at 7 p.m. Monday, May 16th, in the municipal building at 50 Woodland Avenue, Morris Township, New Jersey. For all board members, board professionals, and applicants and their professionals, objectors professionals, and all members of the public are invited to attend via our Zoom link. We'll now rise for a salute to the flag.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now ask our secretary to call the roll of board members and professionals.
Mr. Quillen.
Here.
Mr. Bai.
Here.
Mr. Jorfi.
Here.
Ms. Murphy. Ms. Van Order.
Here.
Ms. Wilson.
Here.
Mr. Flowers.
Here.
Ms. McKay. Ms. McKay.
I'm here. Sorry, I was having problems.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Benoit.
I'm here.
Mr. Nunn.
Here.
Mr. D'Alesso.
Here.
Mr. Warner.
Here.
Mr. Slate. Mr. Phillips.
Here.
And I, Sonia Santiago, here.
Okay, we're going to jump right into it then. Do you want to call the first applicant, Ms. Santiago?
Yes. Mr. Chairman, this is PBO 122, Red Bull Arena, Inc. For an amended general development plan, block 9104, lot, that's supposed to be 9101. Lot 4 and 5, 101-103 Columbia Road in the OL 40 PUD zone.
Thank you.
That's enough for the description.
I'm going to turn this over to our board attorney to introduce the application a little further.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board Attorney Steve Warner, I did want to first reflect that I had an opportunity to review the notice for this application in public hearing. I found the content of the notice to be sufficient, found it to be timely served. Certified mail on May 4, published on May 3, both at least 10 days prior to this evening. So the board does have, in my legal opinion, jurisdiction to hear and decide this amended GDP approval application this evening. I did want to give a brief, hopefully brief, at least in legal terms, brief overview of what we're doing tonight and what we're not doing tonight in an effort to help board members and members of the public to focus on what this public hearing is all about this evening. First of all, historically, for reference, well, first of all, the application is the Red Bull Arena Inc.'s application for amended general development plan approval for the property 9101 lots 4 to primarily lots 4 and 5, whereby the applicant is proposing to develop an athletic training facility on a portion of the overall tract, lots 4 and 5, consistent with the ordinance 27-21. Which the governing body adopted back in December of 2021, amending the underlying OL 40 PUD zoning to permit athletic training facility use within the non-residential overlay district of the general development, the former Honeywell tract. The applicant is historically, for the benefit of the board and members of the public, back in 2014, a predecessor received GDP approval for the entire 147-acre former Honeywell tract. It provided for development of a total of 900,000 square feet of office and lab space, 235 townhouses, including 24 affordable townhouse units, and 14.5 acres of open space on the entire 147-acre tract. The applicant is now seeking to amend that 2014 GDP approval such that as an alternative to the approved 900,000 square feet of office or lab space, the athletic training facility would be built or could be built on lots 4 and 5, the approximately 81-acre non-residential overlay district component of the planned unit development. Lots 6, 7, and 8, as probably everyone already knows, have already been approved and developed for 235 townhouses on lots 6 and 7, and lot 8 was a dedicated open space provided to the township. If approved, the GDP amendment sought by Red Bull Arena Inc. this evening would allow the applicant to proceed down the road with a site plan application for lots 4 and 5, but it would not rescind the 2014 GDP approval as it presently exists, including the aforementioned office laboratory space on those lots 4 and 5. That GDP approval will remain in full force and effect through February 2028 by its terms. So that is what is the application that is pending before the board. Let me give a little more detail because as the board knows, the 2014 GDP approval has been amended a few times already back in 2016, 17, and 18. This board made various amendments pursuant to requests by the developers at the time to amend that GDP approval, including the provision of trails, meandering trails, as I recall, back in 2016, I believe it was, as well as some other amendments in 2017, 28. General development plans are provided for by the municipal land use law for tracts that have at least 100 acres. This, as I mentioned, is a 147-acre former Honeywell headquartered tract. GDPs provide advantages to both the developer and the municipality. Developers are able to develop larger pieces of land that oftentimes are developed by multiple developers and in multiple phases in a way which is coordinated and which affords the developer the certainty of as much as 20 years, here it's 12 years, for purposes of their approvals. What it helps the municipalities, such as our township general development plans do, because it allows the entire tract to be developed in a coordinated fashion, as opposed to through the submission of piecemeal applications throughout the process. Once accepted, a GDP, General Development Plan, can be amended, and with few exceptions, those amendments require a planning board hearing. No matter how significant or insignificant the amendment may be in one's mind, just about any amendment to a GDP requires a hearing before the planning board that originally adopted the General Development Plan. So in a way, some people will refer to a GDP as a mini master plan, if you will, for the 147-acre Honeywell tract. What we are doing this evening is we are hearing an amendment to that 2014 GDP document, that report. The Township Committee, as everyone's aware, had multiple extensive public hearings in December of this past year, and I believe unanimously adopted the ordinance that provides for athletic training facilities to be used as an alternative non-residential use to the office research laboratory use for lots 4 and 5, the 81 acres interior, so to speak, in the tract. As I said, as an alternative use for that non-residential overlay zone. So in effect, what we're doing this evening is we're considering the amendment to a document where the change essentially happened about 5 months ago, when the governing body, after extensive hearings, introduction of the ordinance, and ultimately the public hearings over multiple nights in December, and then the unanimous adoption of the ordinance, implemented the alternative athletic training facility use as one of the two alternative uses that can be developed for lots 4 and 5 in the non-residential overlay district. This application would reflect that change that already occurred if it's granted. So it is a limited jurisdiction of the board, and for the benefit of members of the public as well, this is not the site plan application. How the site might be developed and all the usual quote unquote issues with site circulation and parking and noise and this and that that we all address comprehensively through fact and test and expert testimony and documentary evidence. That is for another day, if there is another day when there is a site plan application. This is simply to amend that general development plan document that was adopted in 2014 to reflect what occurred 5 months ago, this alternative athletic training facility use. Nothing more, nothing less. So candidly, any questions that relate to site plan are probably going to be met with what would be an appropriate response, which is this is not the time for those questions. This is not a site plan application. This is simply an amendment to the general development plan. It's a predicate step, not the hearing on the site plan application for this tract. So I apologize as usual for not being as brief as I intended to be. But hopefully the explanation gives the board and members of the public some historical context, some understanding of what we're doing this evening, and some understanding of what we're not doing this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. So I'll ask the applicant to put on their first witness.
I believe we have counsel, Mr. Rassiopi here, may want to make an opening of his own.
Very short opening. Thank you, Chairman and Mr. Warner. Appreciate the introduction. So my name is Nick Rassiopi. I'm with the law firm of Riker Danzig, and I'm representing the applicant Red Bull Arena, Inc. First, let me say that I am honored and humbled to have been asked to be part of the Red Bull team and to have the opportunity to assist in whatever small way with this proposed state-of-the-art, first-class athletic facility. Now, we all get jaded about delivering platitudes concerning the projects we are working on. But this facility and this project deserve any and all of the many platitudes we may bestow on it. As a Morris Township resident myself, I could not be more proud that the Red Bulls have considered this site in my hometown to create this facility. And in my humble opinion, I believe this athletic training facility will be a testament not only to Morris Township, but also to the surrounding communities, the county, the state, and even the country. That's right, even the country, since this will be one of the first of its kind in the US. This will be, if approved, national news. And those of you who participated in rezoning heard that this facility will certainly have a much lesser impact on the surrounding area than the permitted 900,000 square foot of office space and all the traffic associated with that use. That is true, but lesser impact does not mean no impact at all. Obviously, any development will have some impact on the neighbors, and the Red Bulls are very sensitive to that. From the start of this process, we have engaged the public. After the Red Bulls decided on the location and had a preliminary concept, one of the first steps the Red Bulls made was to advertise and arrange for a public meeting, which, by the way, was very heavily attended. And at that meeting, we presented the project, but more importantly, we listened to the neighbors' concerns. The Red Bulls continue to communicate with the neighbors and continue to listen everywhere reasonably possible. We are incorporating those points into our drafts of the site plans yet to come. And we'll continue to listen and accommodate going forward as the site plan process is initiated and progresses. For example, the condo association, which is our neighbor, has recently requested that we meet with their landscape architect. We think that's a great idea. We are setting that up. The condo association also asked that we sit down with their board before any site plan hearing, if we get there. We are setting that up. The neighbors in Green Knoll had asked for the same meeting. We are setting that up. But has been said many times, and Mr. Warner said earlier today, all of that work will happen at the site plan level, not today. So why are we here today? Well, as Mr. Warner explains, we are here for the procedural purpose of making the GDP consistent with the rezoning. That's it. This is not the site plan where we get into the details of the development. And I want to make clear that all of the issues and concerns raised at the time of the rezoning that we stated would be addressed at the site plan will still be addressed at the site plan. Nothing that happens tonight changes or limits that in any way. So with that statement, I will throw it to the author of the amended GDP report, Michael Tobia. He's our planner, and Michael will briefly describe the report. I would like to mention that Michael was involved from the beginning, worked on the initial GDP, so he knows the history of this site as well. So I'd like to introduce Michael Tobia.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'm going to swear Mr. Tobey in, of course, since this is a public hearing, as well as our board professionals, Mr. Phillips and Mr. Slate, and Mr. Fishinger, if he is on with us as well. No, he's not. Okay, everyone but Mr. Fishinger. Please raise your right hand, the three of you. Do all three of you swear to God or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. With your permission, Mr. Chairman, we can bring it back to Mr. Tobia and Mr. Rasio.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. That would be fine.
Michael, the question is simple. Please give the board and the members of the public a brief overview of the amended report.
Okay. Thank you, Nick. First of all, it's Michael Tobia, T-O-B-I-A. I am the applicant's planning consultant, office at 92 Overlook Road, also in Morris Township. And previously qualified Mr. Warner many times here in Township. If you want me to go over qualifications, I'll be happy to do so.
Mr. Tobia, there's one question I'm always going to ask just to double check.
Yes, it is, Steve.
Okay, your license remains in good standing as a professional planner in the state of New Jersey this evening.
Yeah,
Okay.
freshly renewed about 3 weeks ago, I guess.
Right, I believe that was the time frame. I've heard that. Okay, I defer to the chair whether you'll be accepted again as a professional planner.
Yes.
Okay, so accepted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, would it be okay to share a screen here?
Yes.
So, and you all should now see the cover sheet of our GDP.
Yes, we can hear.
Okay, just checking. So this is the document. It is dated April 27th of this year. It was submitted to the town on the 28th. What I'm going to do tonight in about 20 minutes is go through the significant amendments we've made to the 2014 document. Mr. Warner, we're not using any other exhibits. So this is exactly what was submitted to the town. I don't think we need to mark it. Okay.
Right. No, it was submitted more than 10 days prior to this evening, so it does not need to be marked.
Great, thank you. So as you can see here on the cover sheet, this does call out a 2022 amendment to the GDP. The site address is 101 Columbia Road. And importantly, back in about 2016, I think, we did a subdivision of the entire Honeywell parcel, creating lots now known as 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Mr. Warner correctly focused our attention tonight on lots 4 and 5. That's the Red Bull's site, lots 4 and 5, with 6 and 7 now being known as Columbia Park. That's the K. Hovnanian development, and lot 8, an open space parcel now owned by the township that I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. Veteran members of the board and just residents in general will recall Honeywell was on this site for decades. The aerial photo we show on this cover sheet showed much of the development over the years. It amounted to something on the order of 1.15 million square feet of space. It was a rather enormous complex. Virtually all of it now has been demolished with the exception of access roads, some parking lots, curbing. You still see a security guard house out in the field. Now, the best way to explain our changes is to go to the exhibits that we have attached in Appendix 3, starting on page 39 of the document. And I'm going to try and zoom in as best I can here. We'll go through these. A couple of them require a lot more attention than others. Figure 1 shows Columbia Road at the top of the exhibit, Park Avenue to the right side or east side of the exhibit, the site down the middle, and the overall site is about 147 acres. So it's well in excess of the minimum 100-acre threshold mentioned by Mr. Warner. Old Turnpike Road is in the lower left of the exhibit. Some landmarks that you might recall would include Normandy Parkway to the west, Normandy School to the west, the County Golf Club to the south of our site. And by the time you get to the intersection of Columbia Road and Park Avenue, the township municipal boundary appears. To the east of it is both the borough of Florham Park as well as the township of Hanover. So we're right over in the corner of the township. The existing conditions map shows the components of the GDP that have been finalized. To the east of the Red Bull site is what we used to call the residential east overlay. In this area, you now find 164 townhouses, part of the Columbia Park development. There's also a clubhouse in this area. Fillmore Drive would be the main intersection you would see coming out to Columbia Road. If we go all the way to the west of the site, this is what we used to call the residential west overlay, a smaller component of Columbia Park that includes 71 townhouses. Back in 2014, when the original GDP was formulated, a 10% open space requirement was requested by the township, was codified both in ordinance and GDP, and that 14.68 acre site is now illustrated by my pointer at the west end of the site near Old Turnpike Road. So what we now have is the final piece of the puzzle, which is the Red Bull site. Historically, we know this was originally envisioned by the GDP as a 900,000 square foot office campus that would have included a significant Honeywell development, as well as what initially was conceived to be 5 new corporate office buildings on the tract. That development, as you heard from Mr. Warner, would still be permitted under the GDP. It is still permitted under Ordinance 2721, adopted back in December, but it's only a backup. The anticipation is New York Red Bulls will come in and develop this 81-acre site with ball fields and office buildings, dormitory, academy buildings, groundskeeping facilities, and several other uses. The total build-out anticipated by Red Bulls will be about 250,000 square feet of floor area. Roughly 27% of the build-out that would have taken place under the office scenario. Okay, so let's go to figure 2. And all figure 2 is the existing conditions that I just described in a black line drawing rather than with aerial photography. So Columbia Park is to the east, it's to the west, the open space is far to the west. And as I told you before, lot 4 and 5 comprise the Red Bull site. That's slide 2. Slide 3 shows our existing constraints plan. I would point out, by the way, all these figures that you're seeing, all these illustrations were done over the last several months to basically honor the format of the 2014 document. So every illustration you see here was also found in the earlier document. This is an existing constraints map that tells us a couple basic things. One, the Red Bulls development will take place almost entirely on uplands, meaning no wetlands. And 2, mostly on previously disturbed land, namely the buildings, parking lots, and other facilities of Honeywell. We do not anticipate any environmental challenges with this property. Slide 4. We call this the zoning plan. All that we've done here, folks, to respect ordinance 2721 is to bring this new GDP into full conformance with that document. The noteworthy change in ordinance 2721 was to replace what was then called an office lab overlay zone with what you see on this plate now called a non-residential overlay district. The non-residential district still permits the office lab option, and it also permits the athletic training facility use, AKA what Red Bulls intends to build. Importantly, it does not permit both. So you have an option here to either build office under the ordinance or build an athletic training facility, not both. We are going with the Red Bulls facility on the site. This is a slide or figure 4B. And this shows our zoning plan in the context of area land uses. We've been over this before, but we have townhouses to our east, townhouses to our west, and the site is shown dead center on the slide. Our general land use plan also brings the GDP into conformance with the zone plan. It now identifies the residential parcels that have been built out, the non-residential parcels contemplated by the GDP. And remember, this is a requirement of the GDP and of the ordinance. Residential development of the Red Bull site is not permitted. As an example, this was always intended going back to 2014 as a mixed use plan development. And this shows that, and it shows our acreage of the 2 parcels adding up to almost 81 acres. Okay, so we're on circulation now, and the circulation plan does a couple things. One, it identifies that since 2014, and as a result of the Hovnanian development and contributions by the landowner of the office site, road improvements called for in the GDP have been implemented along Columbia Road. That means road widening, traffic signal timing, turning lanes. Stockton Drive has been aligned over the last several years to now connect to Normandy Heights Road. Previously, it angled slightly to the east, creating an awkward intersection. So that improvement has been made. The GDP 8 years ago called out Stockton Drive. Back then we called it Road A. That's now in. Road B back in 2014 was Prescott Road, AKA Road B, and Prescott, as you all know, is in. All the internal roads for Columbia Park are in, and for the westerly component as well. For those of you who own hiking boots, a really nice walking trail has been installed mostly around the perimeter of the site, connecting to traction line trail that runs down near Old Turnpike Road and parallel to the train line. The circulation plan, if you read the narrative, says a few important things. One, this applicant, in the studies we've been doing leading up to this GDP, does not contemplate any changes to the existing roads you see in the field. No new traffic signals are proposed. No more road widening is proposed. So what you see out there right now is what you get. We do anticipate at the time of site plan, Morris County will review this plan because of its jurisdiction over Columbia Road, and we may be changing the timing of signals out on the road. We anticipate that they will be, if anything, minor changes and minor circulation changes in general. So when you see the site plan, the only circulation changes will be the internal driveways, parking lots, and service roads on the actual Red Bull site. We'll go to the next slide. The open space plan, which is figure 7, simply recognizes now that the township owns a 14.6 acre open space parcel at the western end of the site. It came out to that funny number because that is the number that was needed to meet a 10% set aside requirement for open space. That's how we ended up at 14.68 acres. Not much to tell you about utilities. The GDP notes that the same basic assumptions in 2014 will apply to utilities here in 2022. Water, gas, and electric will come in from service on Columbia Road. Sanitary sewer, I understand, will go to a pump station near Prescott Road. The assumptions made in 2014 for utility planning contemplated those much bigger buildings. So we know we're going to be okay as to capacity for utilities for the New York Red Bulls proposal. Slide 9. The same thing can be said about stormwater management. Now, when we get to the site plan, you're going to hear a lot about stormwater, but the basic takeaways now are that the stormwater facilities and the basins on this site were planned to accommodate office lab space that would have been significantly larger than the Red Bull site. We know we're going to be okay with our stormwater facilities, and we know that we know the impervious coverage of the Red Bulls site will be less than the anticipated 900,000 square feet of space envisioned for office development. The office development, going back historically, would have been required to provide about 3,600 parking spaces. Red Bulls, by contrast, will show you a site plan soon that will have about 500 spaces, a small fraction of what was envisioned with the office development, and consequently, much less stormwater management. Our most important slide in the presentation that I'm about to wrap up is figure 10. It's called an illustrative concept plan. It was called an illustrative concept plan back in 2014. And this shows what we're planning for New York Red Bulls. This is a concept plan. It's a rather detailed concept plan that will change slightly as we prepare our site plan drawings, but it's going to be significantly consistent with what you see here. On this illustration, Prescott Road runs along the bottom of the exhibit. Stockton Road along the right side of the exhibit. Normandy Road, Normandy Parkway neighborhood to the west of the exhibit. This is a zoomed in plan, so you're not seeing as much area detail, but a portion of the residential east component appears to the right of the exhibit. That's where you would find roads such as Aldridge Court, Delano Court, and Oheka Place. A portion of residential west appears to the west of the exhibit, where you would find Warren Drive, Lee Drive, Gates Road, and that cluster of townhouses. What you see on the concept plan is a proposal for 8 main fields. A smaller youth field off of Stockton, our academy buildings, academy dorms, office buildings, a field house is called out. An indoor half field is called out. We have a groundskeeping facility at the northern extreme of the site. And off to the west, we have 2 future buildings that contemplate a women's academy on the property as well. If you look at the parking areas on this, I'm not going to ask you to count the stalls, but we're showing about 500 surface parking stalls throughout the area. We're showing extensive buffering to the east of our development and to the west of our development to be a good neighbor with our neighboring townhouse communities. As Mr. Warner has said and Mr. Rassiopi, this is not a site plan. Okay, it's a concept plan designed to give you a broad idea of what's coming. Our site plan is coming as soon as possible. We're working on it now. What the site plan is will be the detailed engineering and architectural drawings that will cover a variety of topics, including building location, building design, landscaping, lighting, buffering, fencing, and many other details, including things like stormwater management. That is coming shortly. And at that time, we're also going to present a written report on traffic, as well as testimony on traffic, parking facilities, and loading. So it's going to be quite a show when we pull all that together. That will also require, incidentally, public notice and hearings before this planning board. The GDP also has a fiscal impact statement, which I believe is Appendix 1 in the document. That fiscal impact statement was prepared consistent with the ordinance, and again, following the format of the 2014 document. The fiscal study identifies what I just described to you here on Figure 10 as a $112 million construction project. $112 million, not counting land costs. When you run the numbers on this overall complex, it projects to tax revenues that will quadruple what the site is now paying in terms of property taxes. Importantly, because these are private roads and a private facility, virtually every needed service by Red Bulls, Columbia Park, East and West will be paid for privately, which means the township will not be responsible for road maintenance, trash, snow removal, and in the case of Red Bulls, even site security. So there's a strong positive fiscal impact associated with the Red Bulls proposal. The fiscal is not binding. It's not an assessment of the property. That'll all be done once construction starts. But our data points show that this will be a strong fiscal impact. No school kids, incidentally, will go to the local school district. And overall, it'll be a really positive fiscal. So I'll ask Mr. Rassiopi if he thinks I forgot anything. If he says no, I think we'll invite your questions if you have any.
Thank you, Michael. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
I'd like to open up questions now to our board members. So any board members having a question for the applicant? And before I do that, Mr. Warner, could you just remind us again? This is just a technical comment. This is not any site plan application questions. This is not any questions about the facility itself or how it will operate. This is just for the technical ability to change the GDP.
Essentially, yes, the amendment to all those other more site development related issues are appropriate at the site plan application stage, which you heard may be coming and may be coming soon. But this is just to amend the GDP report to update it to reflect the changed zoning that took place in late December of 2021.
Thank you. Just to clarify that. Any board members have any questions? I see Ms. Wilson has her hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I have a couple of questions and one comment. I want to just thank Mr. Rasiopi for the comments about working with the neighbors. I think that's so important. And I know that many of the residents do have ideas and questions. And I'm glad to know that you're working with the landscape architect of the condo association and that you're working with the condo board and with the neighbors from the Green Knolls neighborhood. So thank you for that. I know it's appreciated by all. Mr. Tobia mentioned that there were no environmental challenges were anticipated. And I just wanted to follow up on a couple of points made in the report that we have, which I also appreciated the report. It said that on page 15, under environmental inventory, it says, note the remediation work described in section 3.2 is nearly complete. I assume section 3.2 referred to the original GDP from 2014. So I would like to ask for a quick summary of what that remediation work was that is now nearly complete.
Sure. So, Ms. Wilson, that back in the day, dieldrin was found on this site when we were doing, all our engineering work and feasibility work. And I believe the dieldrin, which was kind of a fertilizer type product, had to be controlled and capped. I don't do the environmental work myself, as you might know, but that's been worked on. And what we put in the report is accurate. It's nearly complete.
And then it goes on in the next sentence to talk about a deed notice has been issued for lots 4 and 5. What does that mean?
That's pretty standard for remediation to remind future homeowners through a recorded document that a cleanup took place on the site.
Okay. And then in the next section, hydrology, I just wanted to clarify, the athletic training facility will have less impervious coverage, but I would imagine that it would have a greater need than an office, 900,000 square feet of office space for water, to water the fields, I would assume. Can you comment on that? Like, how does that work?
I think, first of all, this section, which is section 4.5, is really talking about stormwater rather than potable or rather than, water for the fields. Our engineer has reached out to utility companies to make sure we have adequate capacity. My understanding is the answer on all utilities is service can be provided to the site. Now, I know this is hard to resist, but really what you're asking are site plan questions.
Yeah.
And we're gonna, just so you and the public knows, and you know this, Ms. Wilson, but we're gonna present engineering testimony, traffic, architecture, the whole shebang. And I'm taking notes here. We'll make sure we handle water supply in our presentation. Okay.
Thank you.
You're
Well,
welcome.
I understand well the difference with the site plan, but I was just picking up on the section hydrology. So I appreciate your response. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. Is there another, Mr. Quillen has his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me all right?
We hear you fine.
Okay, thank you. I had one question for Mr. Tobia about the roadways on the property, and our package contained information about easements which have been granted to owners in various parcels on different lots. And I wondered if you could please run us through how folks who are on the Red Bull site on either lot 4 or 5 would get to each of the surrounding roads outside of the property, which easements they would use, and how they would get to Columbia Road and Park Avenue and Old Turnpike Road.
Sure. So back in about 2016, maybe it was 2014, subdivision approval was granted here. There were site plans granted for Hovnanian, for Honeywell, and for the then owner of the property, which was Rockefeller, trading as RG Columbia. At that time, all the attorneys involved created a series of cross-access easements on the topic you're talking about, which is establishing a legal right to share roads. In the case, if you look at figure 10 of getting out to Old Turnpike Road, the Red Bulls users can in fact get out to Prescott Road, and they will cross the Hovnanian parcel, which is lot 7, and they will cross the open space parcel, which is lot 8. And there's an easement for Prescott Road that grants them permission to do so. Okay, and then the same thing can be said heading eastbound. Our folks on the Red Bull site will be able to get to Prescott Road, traverse the east component of Columbia Park in the far right of Exhibit 10, and legally use Prescott to get out to Park Avenue.
How
about Columbia Road? Could you run us through that as well?
Stockton Drive is on the Red Bull site. So we did not need an easement there, and it simply goes out to Columbia at the signal.
What are the easements that the residential neighbors have to use Stockton Drive?
They're the same. When I said cross access, they're entitled to use Stockton. And they're also entitled to go to the west of the property across lot 7 and 8 to get out to our Old Turnpike. So that's the idea of cross access. Everybody gets to share the roads. The one that is not shared, incidentally, is what we used to call the service road on the far west side of the site, which I believe can only be accessed by Red Bulls.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure of. And as far as where that access road will terminate, I guess that's yet to be determined. That'll be a site plan matter, it sounds like to me.
Yes, a lot of this is going to be site plan, and we'll go over it with you in greater detail then. But that's basically, the whole idea was sharing facilities here. That's how you ended up with a walking trail. You ended up with open space. And it was planned as a mixed-use development, as I said earlier.
Okay, that was all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quillen. Does anybody else have any questions for this applicant? Seeing none, I'll turn it over to our board professionals. Mr. Phillips?
Sure. Mr. Tobia, you covered this to some extent and also in answering the last question, but since traffic is clearly a concern of many of the residents in the area, could you just briefly discuss the types and level of analysis the applicant will be performing during the site plan stage, and also indicate the extent to which issues related to internal circulation will be addressed at that time as well, just to give a preview, understanding that that's kind of not within the domain of this GDP, but given that it's a concern, can you address that issue at this time?
Sure, Mr. Phillips. And I'm not going to go too far because Mr. Warner is going to jump on me for doing traffic testimony, I'm sure. But if you go to page 12 in the GDP, we did go to the trouble of identifying all the intersections that will be studied by our traffic engineer at the time of site plan. We've done traffic counts at 10 intersections for weekday peak hours and 5 intersections for weekend hours, which would be a 7-hour window, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. is what we studied. We're putting together a voluminous traffic study that will explore impacts on all these intersections studied. And we do know broadly, and this should be fairly intuitive, that when compared to 900,000 square feet of office space, the comparison is very favorable, meaning lower trip generation than what was originally approved for this project. Did I help you out there, Mr. Phillips?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And then just one other question, Mr. Toby, and I apologize but did you cover the timing schedule as set forth in your submission? What the anticipated timing is?
No, let me do that, and I'm sorry about that. So,
Thanks.
on page 17 of the GDP is indeed a timing schedule that covers 3 phases. Okay, and basically what's happening is phase 1, which is 2 years in duration, will include 6 of the fields, construction of the fields, I should say, the main buildings on the site, the groundskeeping building to the north, the field house to the north, and demolition of every remaining Honeywell improvement on the site. The 6 fields in phase 1 would be 2 fields in the southeast corner of the site, as well as 4 fields that run down the center of the site. So, translation, a lot of this proposed development is taking place in phase 1 during a 2-year window.
Great.
Phase 2 will then begin 6 months after that initial phase. It will possibly still include construction of the dormitory, depending on if we get that done in phase 1 or not. Construction of the indoor field to the north of the site, an agility field off to the west of field number 7, and the construction of 3 final fields known as fields 3, 4, and 9. I would note, Mr. Phillips, you may not be able to see it on your monitor, but all our fields are numbered on the plan for ease of discussion. Okay, that's a 2-year window for phase 2. And then phase 3 is the shortest one, which starts about a year after phase 2. And it would include 2 buildings in the northwest corner of our site, which are intended for a women's academy. And those buildings are now being circled on the monitor. So it's a 6-year plan. That's how we get to the year 2028. So we're going to still use that same 12-year protection window that was approved with the old GDP. The site plan that's coming will show a phasing plan as well, Mr. Phillips. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. We'll now open up to the public. So I ask that anybody from the public that would like to ask a question of this applicant based on the change in the GDP, not a site plan question. Site plan questions will be answered when the site plan is presented. And I'll ask that when you, if we acknowledge you, you give us your name and address. Thank you. So I see one hand up. Mr. McHugh, can you hear us?
Right. The question I have is, this is not,
I'm sorry, Mr. McHugh, Steve Warner, Board Attorney. I apologize for interrupting. If each person can give us first your
Yes.
name
okay,
and your address, please.
fine. Don and Pat McHugh, MCHUGH, 10 Waldridge Court.
Thank you.
All right, this is a question for Mike Tobia on Exhibit 11, the last one you showed, on 9, which is future field. I cannot read what's underneath that. Another 3 letters. What does that say?
Okay, so first of all, Mr. McHugh, is it?
Yes,
Okay, so first of all, so the record's clear, this is figure 10, called illustrative concept plan. What that says, and the gentleman is talking about the field off to the east side of the site, it says 9v9. Okay, all that means is this is a slightly smaller field intended for teams of 9 individuals each, meaning 9 members on one team versus 9 members on the other.
so it's 99. Okay. And the other question is, when the ordinance was put through with the zone change, is that the use that was proposed in that area behind Aldrich? Has there been any change in what was originally approved with the zone change ordinance?
And are we talking about that particular field?
Yes, that particular location.
Right, so the ordinance does not specify particular locations. The ordinance does permit, among many other uses, outdoor fields.
Right.
Okay, so all 9 of the fields you see here, Mr. McHugh, are permitted outdoor field uses.
And that's how they were proposed when the ordinance was adopted, yes?
There was always a field proposed, to the best of my knowledge, in that general vicinity.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. McHugh.
Thank you.
Next question. Again, just to remind the public, please give us your name and address before you start.
Hi, hello, good evening, everybody. Sue Sorcelli, 9 Green Knolls Road. I read the entire thing and I'm very impressed with your detail. I just have some wording concerns on page 5. And you speak about it when you start that long list of what is going to be there. The first word I see is approximately. Approximately, and then you list a whole bunch of things. So my first question is, to what part of this long list does approximately refer to?
We write words like approximately into these plans because, as we've said a few times now, it's a plan, okay? As Board Attorney Warner said, it's a mini master plan. So we put that in just for flexibility and to protect us, knowing that by the time we get to an engineered site plan, things may move a little bit. It may not be 4 fields, it may be 3, and that's why that word is in there. However, if you go through this long list of proposed buildings and fields and so on page 5, basically everything there is shown on this concept plan. Some exceptions include things like lighting and buffering, which will be submitted on very detailed sheets during the site plan part of the case.
All right. My second question is further down on that list. It's listed as, quote, other uses customarily incidental to the training facility.
Got it.
And then there's a footnote that says the training complex is still in the planning phase and proposed facility changes may change as the plans progress. In my view, if these statements, if accepted as is, gives the Bulls a blank check for whatever else they might want to add over the 6 years and the 3 phases of building. That incidental scares me. This incidental can become anything. It can become tournaments that were not originally thought of in the original site plan. It can become a lot of things because of that wording. And I think that wording should be looked at very carefully and maybe rephrased by the planning board so that there is a little less flexibility over the next 6 years.
I got you. So,
Before you answer, if I may, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Sarcelli, are you, since that may be construed as a comment versus a question, the appropriate thing for me to do would be to swear you in so that there's no problem in your comment being a part of the record.
Oh,
Do you
okay,
mind?
not a problem.
I appreciate that. Is it possible for you to turn the video on so I can see you raise your right hand when I swear you in?
Absolutely. Can you see me now?
Mr. Slade is going to promote you.
Okay.
I don't know if that comes with a, badge or a special title or anything, but hang on one second.
Okay. Do you want me to click on join as a panelist?
Yes. She's at the top.
Oh,
I just unmuted myself, but I still don't, I have my camera on. I mean, it's open. You should be able to see me.
yeah.
Still.
Anything we can do there? Are you sure you have your
Ah,
video?
there we
on?
go.
Oh, there we go. Thank
I
you.
had another click. I'm sorry. I'm not that good at Zoom. So
No
my
problem.
apologies.
We're all getting better. If you can raise your right hand, please.
Sure.
Do you swear to God or affirm that the testimony you just gave and any more that you may give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. And I apologize for the delay. Hopefully, Mr. Tobia remembers the comment / question.
Okay.
we do. And let me just say, the language that you mentioned, which is other uses customarily incidental to the training facility, is standard language in my field to recognize that we cannot anticipate every single minor use of a property this complex. For instance, things like sidewalks, lampposts, sheds, fences, trash receptacles are not all enumerated in the plan. So we use blanket language like that to protect ourselves and make sure we have the flexibility to do the job right. I would also point out that identical language, the customary incidental language, is used in the township's own ordinance in the same context. Okay. As far as footnote 1 goes, this is once again to recognize that we need a little flexibility. We cannot, on the one sheet you see up on the monitor, known as figure 10, possibly provide all the detail that we will show you at site plan, which will be in the form of a multitude of drawings and plan submissions. So we put that language in to protect ourselves. But as I've said before, we have been working on the site plan. We have been working on the architecturals. And we know that what you're looking at here will be significantly consistent with the site plan. Okay, to put it a different way, our deviations from this concept plan will be minor.
Okay, well, then I still feel that the board should then consider rewording it and then saying incidental event that the, custom that I understand you're talking about, now we're talking site plan. I don't want to get into that. I understand that. My concern is that the initial concept of what you want this facility to offer might be expanded. And you're going to fall back and go and say, oh, well, you know what? It's under customary incidentals or whatever you want to call it, It would not be an incidental if something is brought in that is an event that then becomes something more than just a training facility. That's my concern.
Mr. Sarcelli, I think we've heard you. We understand what you're saying. This is just
okay, good.
This
That's
is
cool.
just technical, and I promise you that
I lost you. Okay, we're good. I'm good. I just wanted to make myself known that I just want to make sure that this does not go past a training facility. That's all.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
I can't hear, I can't hear the courtroom either. This is Tanya Van Order. I'm not sure
Yeah.
if other panelists are having the
I
same.
lost.
problem.
I don't either. I lost everybody except I lost that Mr. Slate.
Yeah, me too.
So
Are you there? Chairman, are you there?
yeah, we have to see whether they can get us back connected.
But I'm finished. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you listening and hearing my concern.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Sending a text. Hey, Joe. I think we lost you. What happened? Okay. Sure. Okay. Will do. Okay, thanks. So I just heard from Joe Alesso, and they're having a tech difficulty in the meeting room, and they can hear us. But hold on.
Kathy, can you mute yourself?
Oh, mute? No, I was making an announcement. He asked me to make an announcement.
I understand that, but you're on the phone now. That's what I was just asking for.
Okay, all right. Yes, so they can.
I heard someone kicked a soccer ball and knocked out the power.
That's gotta be Frank.
No, somebody did not like my promotion. That's what it was.
The promotion threw us off. Shut everything down, Miss Sarcelli, the promotion.
As soon as the tough question came, boom, there goes the feed.
So, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
The request is for all of us to log out and wait 60 seconds and then log back in.
Okay,
So we'll see you in a minute.
see you in a minute. Okay, I believe we're back in business. Does anyone from the public have a comment that we haven't heard yet?
I apologize, but if we could just wait a little longer. If we could also do a roll call.
Yes, Mr. Warner, I apologize. That would be appropriate at this moment. So, Ms. Santiago, would you mind giving us a roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Quillen,
Come back to him.
okay, Mr. By,
Here.
Mr. Dorothy,
We'll come back to him.
Ms. Murphy,
I'm here.
Ms. Van Order,
Here.
Ms. Wilson,
Here.
Mr. Flowers,
Here.
Ms. McKay,
I'm here.
okay. Mr. Dorothy?
So the mayor, I thought it
Here.
said- There he is.
Okay,
Mayor's here.
Mayor here, okay. Mr. Nunn,
Here.
Mr. Benoit,
Here.
Mr. Quillen,
Here.
Mr. Alessa.
Here,
Okay, did I miss somebody?
let's go to our board professionals.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's all 11 board members.
Mr. Warner,
I'm here.
Mr. Slate, Mr. Phillips,
Here.
and I, Sonia Santiago, here.
Okay, let's also make sure the applicant is still here. Mr. Rassiopi, are you out there?
Yes, I'm here.
And Mr. Tobia?
I'm here.
Okay.
Okay, can I open up the public?
Yeah, it looks as if all our members of the public are back. All right, looks like we're good, Mr.
Excellent. We see one hand raised. Again, please give us your name and your street address.
Good evening. This is Chris Perry, 2 Delano Court. First of all, thank you very much for your time and commitment to getting this right. I've noticed that the Red Bulls have quite a few programs in Whippany that they run in evenings, weekends, and I'm wondering what level of studies done around the size of the roads here. They're very narrow, and the sidewalks and walkways for people that are pedestrian walking around the neighborhood. Could you please comment on that?
So if that's a question for me, Mr. Perry, you're asking exactly the type of thing that we will be presenting at the time of site plan, meaning roadway dimensions, sidewalk dimensions, connectivity, and things like that. I haven't seen the site plan yet because it's not finished. So we're going to ask you to be patient and understand there's a big presentation coming where we will be looking at what you're broadly referring to as circulation issues.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anyone else from the public? No, I see another hand raised.
Hello.
You're
My name is
on, we can hear you.
Great.
Just give us your name and address, please.
My name is Jessely, Jessely, Dela Cruz, DELACRUZ. My street address is 463 Walker Street.
Go ahead with your question.
Sure. I guess I'm concerned that the township has not fulfilled its affordable housing obligations, and if this plan is moving forward with a training complex proposal without a conversation about how and where affordable housing will be built. If it's not on this site, are you considering other sites for affordable housing development?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to advise the board that that's not a question that's appropriate for general development plan amendment applications. It's not at issue before the board in this phase of the proceedings. And also, of course, there's litigation pending that it would be prudent of me, it would be imprudent if I didn't advise the board to be circumspect with respect to those issues. So this has nothing to do with the affordable housing obligation on behalf of the municipality, other than to say that this tract already provides 24 affordable townhouse units with associated credits. If I recall correctly, the credits may be even more than the number of 24 units towards the township's obligation. And this particular 147-acre mixed-use tract always had a residential component, which spawned those 24 affordable units, and always had lots 4 and 5, these two lots that are at issue for the general development amendment tonight, lots 4 and 5 as a non-residential district, and that has not changed. This is a proposed alternative use to the non-residential district that those 81 acres were never going to produce residential units, let alone have an affordable component as the same.
Thank you.
Otherwise, if I may, Mr. Chairman, Township-wide, this township is in full compliance with its affordable housing obligation, consistent with a judgment, a final judgment of compliance and repose entered by the court in an affordable housing declaratory judgment action. And this municipality is in full compliance with its third round obligation, and that third round does not end until July 2025. So in short, while it's not relevant to this evening, I can assure you the answer is fully compliant.
I am in the plan. Are there dorms included in that as part of the proposal, which would be technically residences?
I'm sorry?
Are there not dorms included as part of this proposal?
We don't have a site plan application before us yet, but the athletic training facility use includes a variety of different uses as part of it. And I believe those are appropriately permitted uses under that ordinance, under the that overlay district pursuant to the ordinance.
But the Red Bulls don't already own this land.
I think we're going to thank you, Ms. Dela Cruz, for your question. I think we've answered it, and this is going to be moving on to ask questions that are specific to this technical change to the GDP. Is there anyone else out there would like to be heard? Seeing none, we're going to ask to close the public portion of the hearing, and we'll let Mr. Rassiopi conclude his.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rassiopi, if you have no further witnesses, I apologize. Was that questions and comments? I want to make sure all members of the public have an opportunity to make a comment should they so desire.
I'm sorry, I did not give the opportunity for a comment. That was for the end of questions, so Mr. Rassiopi can excuse this as a witness so that we can move to the comment portion. So we'll now move to the comment portion. Does anyone from the public have any comments? Scanning the list, it doesn't seem that there are any. That's great. Thank you very much. We're now going to close the public comment, and we're going to look for a motion from the board to decide what direction to go in. Excuse me, I forgot. I have to let this is the freshman curse, I'll say. We're going to let Mr. Rassiopi conclude his application, and then we'll open it to the board. Sorry, Mr. Rassiopi.
No,
trying
thank you.
to prevent you from
We
giving
have-
us a long summation.
No, we have no further witnesses, no further comment. Thank you very much, though, for the
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I do know we do have an April 29 memo from Paul Phillips, our planner. I don't know if Mr. Phillips wanted to give any guidance to the board before they deliberate and vote.
Mr. Phillips, it would be.
Mr. Chairman, yes, Mr. Warner is correct. I did prepare a report dated April 29th, basically outlining the submission on behalf of the applicant, indicating that all of the required components of a GDP were addressed as part of that submission. And I had requested in that report that the applicant focus on several of those elements in its presentation this evening. And they addressed those elements, and the only other open issues were addressed by Mr. Tobia in response to my questioning, Mr. Chairman. So I'm satisfied at this point that the applicant has complied with the requests set forth in my report.
I think we lost the audio from the room again.
So
I can hear you. I can hear you. This is Linda Murphy. Are you ready for a motion?
Jim, can you hear us? We did not lose you.
I think we lost audio again from the room.
I think we're talking amongst ourselves,
Yep.
not in the room.
Yeah. So we're gonna try and have this. Mr. Rassiope's made his final close. We're at the point now where we need a motion, a second. We'll have some discussion, and then we'll vote. We'll try to do that through my computer. Then we're gonna shut down, ask everybody to come back for the RH application. We'll reset. So
This is Linda Murphy. I move that we approve the revised GDP.
excellent. Do we have a
This is Tanya
second?
Van Order. I second Ms. Murphy's motion to approve the amended general development plan.
That's with confirmation, Mr. Chairman, that the current GDP improvements of February 2028 and this amended approval will not change that fact. That's a stipulation, correct, Mr. Rassiope?
Can we take a roll?
Hold on a second. Mr. Warner, can you come up here and make that comment?
Yeah, we can't hear him.
All right, we have a stipulation.
I just want to confirm, Mr. Rassiope, that the motion and the second is with the stipulation that the term of the current GDP approval extends until February 2028, and the amended approval would not change the term of said approval.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Murphy, a second by Ms. Van Order. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, I'll call for a vote.
Mr. Quillen,
Yes.
Dorothy,
Yes.
Ms. Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. Bai,
Yes.
Ms. Wilson,
Yes.
Ms. Van Order,
Yes.
Mr. Nunn,
Yes.
Mr. Alesso,
Yes.
Mr. Benoit,
Yes.
so moved.
All right, thank you, everyone. I'm going to ask everyone to disconnect from the Zoom meeting and come back in 60 seconds. And then we'll take roll again.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Board.
Thank you, Mr. Rassiope. Take
See you in
care.
a minute.
Okay, we're going to start the meeting again. We'll start with the roll call. Ms. Santiago, would you call the roll?
Mr. Quillen,
Here.
Mr. Bai,
Here.
Mr. Dorothy,
Here.
Ms. Murphy,
Here.
Ms. Van Order,
Here.
Ms. Wilson,
Here.
Mr. Flowers,
Here.
Ms. McKay,
Come back to her.
okay. Mr. Nunn,
Here.
Mr. Warner,
Here.
Mr. Phillips,
Here.
Mr. Slate, and I, Sonia Santiago here.
You forgot me and Mr. Benoit.
Mr. Alesso,
Here.
Mr. Benoit,
Here.
And now,
Ms. McKay.
I'm afraid to promote her.
Look there.
We may lose her.
I don't see her on the,
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4,
Monitor.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So well, we have 10. We have more
We have a-
than a full complement.
Mhm.
Okay, we're going to then start the application. Mr. Warner, excuse me, Ms. Santiago, you want to tell us the next application?
Our next application is PBO 322, Madison Avenue Urban Renewal LLC for an amended site plan. This is block 8409, lot 1, 315 Madison Avenue in the OSGU zone. Applicant proposes to redesign the facade of the new buildings, increase the number of restaurant seats, and remove the water wall from the outdoor patio with other related improvements.
Okay, before we start, I just want to remind everyone and the public and the applicant that we have a soft stop at 10 o'clock. At a few minutes before 10, we'll decide whether or not we will finish the testimony of the applicant or hopefully and luckily, we'll finish the entire application.
Seeing the case here.
So I think Ms. McKay has joined us. Ms. McKay, are you able to hear us? Okay. Give us one more second. This way we can have a full board. Ms. McKay?
I'm in now, yes.
Great,
Okay,
great,
thank you.
fantastic. I'm going to flip the meeting over to Mr. Warner and we'll get started.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Much shorter opening from me. I just want to have the record reflect that I did have an opportunity to review the notice for this application as well. Found the content to be sufficient, found it to be timely served. Certified mail on May 4 and May 6, published on May 5, both at least 10 days prior to this evening. I believe we have counsel, Ms. Vitolo is here on behalf of the applicant. And at the appropriate time, I'll swear in all the witnesses.
Okay. Mr. Vitolo, would you like to give us all your witnesses so that our board attorney can swear in your witnesses and we can move expeditiously as possible? We'd love to get you finished tonight.
Sure. Yeah, I'll have my witnesses sworn in now. Mr. Warner, we have two witnesses we're going to call this evening. We have Matthew Seckler. I know he's on. And we also will have John Burson, and he also should be on if you'd like to get them sworn and I guess qualified if you want.
Well, I'll do the swearing. You can do the qualifying, but I do need to, can't steal all the thunder, but I do need to see them both if I can. Jim, if you could kind of angle around so I can see them somehow. There we go. There's Mr. Seckler. There's Mr. If you can both raise your right hand, please.
Oh, whoops.
Got it. And as well, Mr. Slade, if you could do the same, and Mr. Phillips, if you could do the same. Do all four of you swear to God or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Got all the app. Oh, and Mr. Fishinger, is he in on this
No.
one as well? No,
No.
not on this one either. Thank you. We're good, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. We're ready for you. I forget the name of the attorney.
Mr. Vitale.
Mr. Vitolo, I apologize. We're ready for you.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's very nice to see everyone this evening. Again, my name is Frank Vitolo. I'm with the law firm of Sills, Cummins and Gross on behalf of the applicant Madison Avenue Urban Renewal LLC. I tell you, I sat through the last application, and who would have thought that in Morris Township you'd be hearing from the Red Bulls and then Restoration Hardware. You guys must be doing something right here. I'll tell you that. So again, I echo Mr. Rassiopi, it's my honor to represent RH this evening. In September of 2021, this board approved applicant's application for site plan approval to renovate and modify the Abbey building and connect it to a new RH home furnishing gallery and associated restaurant and wine vault. This is an application to amend that site plan approval. We're requesting 3 deviations in connection with the application this evening. First, from section 3F, we're proposing to redesign the facade of the proposed new building to better harmonize its look with the existing Abbey. From section 3G3, we are proposing to remove a water feature from the outdoor patio area. And third, from section 3B3, we are seeking to permit a total of 148 restaurant dining seats, where 121 seats were approved, and a total of 164 restaurant and wine vault seats are permitted. Other changes, board, that are not deviations, but I just note them for the record. We're eliminating the basement space or large portions of the basement space in the new building. And we're also redesigning the fountain at the RH entrance. And that will impact a turning movement. So Mr. Seckler will address that. As a result of the changes we're proposing, we have a smaller building now, a smaller building by about 7,000 square feet. We have less building coverage. We have less lot coverage, and we have a slightly shorter new building as well. So here's the roadmap for our presentation this evening. First, I'm going to call Matt Seckler. He's our traffic and civil engineer, and he's going to review the truck turning exhibit with the board, as I discussed, because of the redesigned fountain we have. And he's also going to discuss the parking counts and whether there's any impact as a result of the change in the seats. Next, we're going to call John Burson. He is our project architect. He's going to review with you the new building redesign, and he's going to explain RH's thinking and inspiration for doing so. And he's also going to briefly go over some of the changes to the spaces in the interior of the new building. After Mr. Burson's finished, we're going to recall Mr. Seckler. He's also our planner for this project. And he's just going to, again, describe the deviations and put on proofs as to why we believe those deviations should be granted. Mr. Chair, just two quick notes prior to our beginning. The applicant met on, I believe, 3 times with the TCC and the HPC prior to this evening. And as a result, the design you see this evening has been modified based on those discussions. We've also had several discussions with the HPC regarding the ongoing work on restoring the Abbey, and in particular, the existing stained glass and other windows in that structure. You probably have before you a letter from the HPC describing agreement between RH and the HPC that will require RH to preserve and store the stained glass windows on site until we have a plan for them. I wanted to thank the HPC, and in particular, Carol Barkin, for her patience and her efforts working with us on this agreement and other issues. With that, Mr. Chairman, we are ready to begin.
Yes, please put on your application.
Okay, Mr. Seckler.
Good evening.
Mr. Seckler, were you also the traffic expert in connection with our original site plan application?
Yes, I was.
Okay, and is your license in civil engineering still good?
Yes, it is.
Okay, Mr. Chair, we'd like to qualify Mr. Seckler as an
Yes.
expert.
Yes, we'll accept him as an expert.
As a civil engineer and a traffic engineer both?
Yeah, Mr. Warner.
And while we're at it, as a professional planner, is that license in good standing as well?
Yes, it is.
Would you like him to be accepted in all 3 so we don't forget later?
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Warner.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, all 3 good?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Warner.
So accepted.
Okay, Mr. Seckler, if you would, could you just take the board through the changes that I mentioned at the outset?
Absolutely. And to do so, I'd like to mark, I think I have some exhibits. I think they were all submitted. So I don't know if this board wants them marked or just referenced.
Is it the public hearing? May 16, is it that multi-page?
Yep, I'll be looking at page 6 of it. Is the sheet that I'd like to share.
The whole thing was submitted more than 10 days in advance of this evening, so you could just make reference to it as you go sharing your screen.
Thank you.
Just do let us know what page you're on as you go through. I'll be candid with you. I don't know that they have page numbers per se.
They don't. I don't believe they do. This is the 6th page. I'll jump to number 6 and you'll see all the beautiful images from the architect when they testify in a couple minutes.
Okay, thank you.
So as Frank mentioned, since I guess he copied off of my own hearing outline and mentioned everything I was going to mention, as part of this application, we've made a number of improvements to the site plan that was previously approved. A couple of those improvements are related to site circulation, so I'll address those items first. Again, I'm referring to sheet 6 for orientation of the board. North is actually to the lower right-hand corner of the page. Canfield Road is shown here to the right of the site. Madison Avenue is along the bottom, but again, north is actually to the right-hand side of the page to orientate the board. The access drive along Madison Avenue, that is in the exact location where the current Madison Avenue driveway is, and the proposed Madison Avenue driveway is proposed to be. We were making some slight changes to some of the circulation or the geometry for the internal circulation pattern along this kind of bottom left-hand portion of the site to help facilitate the to keep a number of these large mature trees. So that was one slight change that you would see as part of the site plan. As we move over towards the front of the building, the front motor court, that size has been expanded. The fountain itself has, the design of the fountain has changed. It is now a mountable fountain, meaning that's similar to mountable curbs that you see out in driveways and other kind of parking lots. That is how this fountain will function. An emergency vehicle would have the ability actually to drive over the center of the fountain should they need to do so. However, we've designed the front area to that would be sufficient for a fire truck not to drive over the fountain, but it is rated for a fire truck if necessary. In need of emergency would be able to drive over the center fountain feature. So again, this is not a fountain that is up out of the ground with a large base. It is basically a mountable curb area along the center in which there are water devices underneath that would allow the fountain to expel the water. There are really no changes in terms of the remainder of the site plan as you see it in terms of the circulation pattern. We did identify EV parking spaces, generally located, again, looking at this sheet 6, towards the back left corner of the building near the ADA stalls, along some other, in addition, some other EV parking stations along, again, this kind of top left-hand portion of the site. Those were generally the site plan circulation changes to the site. I could show the truck turning exhibit, which again, I believe was submitted in advance of this application. Mr. Warner, I don't know if that is, if you could confirm that.
I have a May 6th date on it, which if I'm doing the math correct, and it was received May 6th. That's right on the nose. But why don't we call it so the board attorney can sleep a little bit at night? Why don't we call it Exhibit A1?
Exhibit A1 is a truck turning exhibit. There are 3 sheets to it. For the sake of the time that we have, I'd like to just jump to the 3rd sheet, which is titled T3. And again, it's prepared by Stonefield Engineering Design, as mentioned, dated 5/6/2022, truck turning exhibit fire truck T3. What this shows is a fire truck entering along Madison Avenue, the Morris Township fire vehicle. It shows it circulating around the site in the top left-hand frame. Again, shows that it will not necessarily, does not need to drive over the center mountable area, but clearly in the case of emergency, you would have the ability to do so if they thought that that was the fastest and easiest path. And then what it shows is it circulates around the entire building within the drive aisles and would have the ability to exit as well. So again, we saw this as an enhancement to not only emergency access, but also there's a number of visual enhancements that you'll hear later from the architect in terms of the changes to the motor court and some of the facade changes that you'll hear later on. So generally, those are the key site plan changes that you would see on the 2 sheets that I'd be sharing with the board tonight. In addition, as our counsel had mentioned, there are a number of aspects of this application in which we are making modifications and being less intense. We are reducing the maximum building coverage from 18.2 to 17.1%. Both of those previously approved and what we are seeking tonight fall below the 25% requirement or maximum. In terms of lot coverage, we are reducing that from 55.5% to 52.6%. So again, a reduction of about 4%. The maximum lot coverage allowable per the redevelopment plan was 65%. So again, still comfortably below that. In terms of the building height, it was compliant before. We are actually making it slightly shorter in the proposed condition as part of this amended application. So all those things point to this application or this amended application being less intense from all of those standards, but again, still compliant. In terms of building square footage, and you'll hear from the architect later, again, we've reduced some square footage as it relates to the size of the basement. So again, square footage and other measurement intensity being reduced. In terms of the restaurant seating, one item which you can't really identify through the site plan that's shared here, but was within our application materials, is that we are changing the allowance of seats in terms of the restaurant and wine vault area. We are increasing the number of seats in the restaurant to 148 seats. We will not have any seats within the wine vault area. This still puts us in compliance as it relates to the total number of seats between the two, I would say, food or drink uses within the building itself. However, we are exceeding the restaurant seating, and we'll discuss that later on when I go through the deviations as it relates to the redevelopment plan. I want to confirm, however, that we are still compliant with the parking. The parking requirement is based on both the retail floor area of the gallery as well as the seats within the wine bar and restaurant. So while we do not have any wine bar restaurant seats, wine bar seats, we still have the restaurant seats and the floor area of the gallery. And all told, we will have 160 parking spaces where we will have 175 parking spaces where 160 spaces are required. So we still have 15 spaces in excess over what the requirement is. And we still have that split of on-site and off-site parking spaces with that valet operation that was previously testified to. And again, no changes as it relates to that type of operation. So we are still parking compliant with this amended plan. And again, just as it relates to parking, we did agree as part of our previous approval, and obviously would carry that condition forward, is the post-occupancy studies that after this site is open in operation, there'll be continual parking studies to ensure that the parking standards that are here are sufficient. If we find that the parking is insufficient, the applicant is required to seek remedy through means of potential additional valet. And obviously, if the parking is deemed to be more than sufficient or there's excess parking, obviously there are methods that could be managed at that point in the future as well. So your board still has that ability to manage the parking with the applicant in the future. Council, I don't think I have any other comments as it relates to the site plan and parking aspects of this application.
Thank you, Mr. Sackler. I don't have any other questions for Mr. Sackler, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Warner, I would like to have all the applicants, witnesses testify, and then let us open questions from the board. This way we could try to move this along.
It's certainly the discretion of the chair and would not be inappropriate, in my opinion, given the magnitude of the application. It's just an amendment, only certain issues being hit by two witnesses.
Thank you. Mr. Vitolo, if you'll please proceed with your next witness.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, we'd like to call John Burson. Mr. Burson, you testified as the architect on the first go around on site plan. Is that correct?
Correct.
Your license is still good?
Correct.
Okay, we'd like to qualify Mr. Burson as an expert in architecture, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, we just check his license.
Yeah, he said he's still in good standing. He was the architect that we accepted as an expert for the prior original hearing back in the fall.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Okay, Mr. Burson, I understand you're prepared to testify primarily about the facade change. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right, proceed, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, just want to see which teammate has the slide deck for me. Let's see. If not, okay, I will. So, am I able to do a share screen?
You should be.
Okay, good. One sec. Okay, and let's do this.
We still can't see. There it is.
Okay, you see these step. Okay. I will try to keep things moving in the interest of time. But first, I do want to thank the planning board for their attention to this application, their ongoing attention, and also to thank both the Technical Coordinating Committee and the Historic Preservation Commission for their time, the thought and care they've given to this application over the last several months. Let's see. So to sort of get right to it, since the approval of the project back in September, there was a feeling amongst the design team that we should take another look at the facades of the buildings, of the new buildings. We felt that while the original design had great appeal, we wanted to see if we could unify the new and the old architecture. And we looked at a great deal of historical buildings and building types. We looked very, very carefully at the Abbey. We looked at contemporary European brick architecture. So we really did kind of a very deep dive into the architecture. And so we were not focusing on sort of drastic changes to the massing or anything of that sort. Mostly it had to do with ultimately the materials of facade and the kind of the glazing. So what we came up with, principally looking at this rendering, is brick buildings in a kind of a buff, sort of a terracotta colored brick, kind of match the hue of the brick and terracotta at the Abbey. We focused on the brick. We felt that that was an important link to the Abbey. We also think that the brick kind of lends a kind of gravitas to the scheme, a certain solidity. At the same time, brick brings with it sort of demands of detailing. Openings have to be carefully crafted. Corners have to be thought through. There's a vocabulary of reveals that we've worked out throughout the entire scheme. Even you might see them in this rendering, the brick mullions that we've developed on these facades to recall the terracotta mullions at the Abbey. Now, also we looked at the proportion of the fenestration, the proportion of the glazing, and we kind of created a system of much larger glazed areas on both the central axis building and the modern gallery. Part of it was taking cues from the proportions, sort of vertical proportions of the windows of the Abbey, and also as well from the multi-tiered window that's very tall at the I think it's the west end of the Abbey, and you can see that carefully worked out through both the central axis building with its three large windows here, and also in the windows and the two stories of windows over at the modern gallery. The proportioning is the same. The operable sash sizes have been are the same for these two structures. So we feel we've begun to create a modern take on a vocabulary that kind of finds its roots in the Abbey. Some more details we developed were the chamfered corners at both the modern gallery and the central axis building, along with a chamfered reveal. These kind of recall the turrets over at the Abbey without imitating them, just simply nodding to them. We have evened out the parapets at the central axis building. I will get to the height in a moment, but the roof line is consistent. Also, what is consistent is kind of the dimension of the parapet at the central axis building and the modern gallery. An effort was made by us to make the two new buildings relate to the Abbey, but also to make sure they each related to each other, that there was not quite as dramatic a distinction between them as there was in the original scheme, where you had a brick and stucco modern gallery and then the brick central access building. We've kept the proportioning and detailing fairly stark, and probably in an effort to keep the kind of modernity evident in the two new buildings. We've, if you will, flipped the proportion of masonry and glass. There's more masonry than glass at the Abbey. There's more glass than masonry at these two new buildings, but at the same time, they relate, and I think we've come up with kind of a unified architectural campus. I know Matt's spoken about the site. I will have a couple more comments about the landscape further on, just noting that we were able to save some more of the kind of specimen trees over by the entrance on Madison Avenue, and also to emphasize again how important the landscape has been to unifying this scheme from the kind of more naturalistic landscape along Madison Avenue, working back towards through the bleached London plane trees, the parterres in these gardens around the central access building, and then ultimately the parterred furniture gardens. It's very much a unified exterior experience. Moving on to the architecture again, here is a head-on view of the central access building with the redesigned fountain in front. Again, you can see the, call it rust terracotta colored brick with the embedded RH logo. You can see the skylight beyond peeking up above. There was a great deal of work modifying and modulating this parapet height. There is a metal and glass canopy across the front of this building. And again, let's see, with regard to the fountain, it's now, I think Matt called it a mountable curb. It's a series of concentric rings, all just a few inches above the surrounding paving. We've relied on the water to be the expressive element. In addition, we have been working with the landscape and working on removing some trees and trying to get better views of the facades of the buildings when people are on site. Here is a drawing showing an elevation before and after for the new buildings. I'll call your attention though on the upper left corner to that tall, that multi-story unit, multi-story window at the Abbey, because it was an inspiration for much of the glazing of the new buildings. Here at the center, you can see on the left, the before previously approved facade of the central access building. To the right is what's being proposed at this hearing. It's now brick. There is taller glazing. The parapet height is slightly higher. I believe it's about the order of 2 feet. But again, the skylight still pokes up above. You get a better view of the chamfered corner. In this view of this drawing as well, you can see on the upper right, to the left is, to the right of the upper right is the previously approved version of the modern gallery. To the left is the modified facade we are suggesting that we're proposing today. Both the buildings have the taller glazing, same proportion, same size of doorways. We think they relate very closely. The original cornice you can see on the modern gallery, the express cornice, as well as the more modest cornice on the central access building, both have been eliminated. In their place, we're doing what is almost a reverse cornice. It's a beveled block along the top of the parapets. It's as part of our kind of more austere approach, where rather than breaking with the materiality of the facades and putting a different material, a different cornice, we're creating something in the same material, same geometry as the buildings. Also, in the modern gallery, we've removed two elements: the Juliet balconies, as well as the setback on the second floor with its express balcony. The principal facades of the Abbey really don't have setbacks or balconies, other than the porte cochere and the kind of the expressed entry. The building is almost extruded straight in a single plane from ground to parapet, and this is a nod towards that kind of we'll call it massing, austere massing of the Abbey. In addition, in this, you can see between the new central axis facade and the new modern gallery facade, the glazed corridor connecting the two buildings. This is also going to be applied to the left between the Abbey and the central axis building. Here is, in a similar vein, a 3D version showing before and after. You can see the central axis building with its proposed facade on the left and the prior approved one to the right. And at the modern gallery, the proposed revised facade on the left, the previously approved one on the right. The parapet is at the same height. Again, the differences are the cornice, the Juliet balcony, and the second floor setback. The elevation sheet going from east on the top to north, the second elevation, west at the bottom, and south at the bottom of the sheet kind of represent all the various relationships that I've previously spoken about. Here is a close-up of the motor court, fountain, and the central access building. Another view closer up of the modern gallery. Again, you can see the relationship of the two new buildings, as well as the glazed connection between them. Some plan modifications that have been touched on previously. Basements have been removed from the bottoms of the two new buildings. This has been a net reduction of 5,483 square feet. The buildings are now slab on grade, and the utilities been relocated to the roof. At the first floor, let me zoom here. Okay. The one change is that there were two rectangular design consultation areas to either side of the wine bar. These have been removed, and the space given over to the two landscape courtyards to either side. These are symmetrical with the two landscape courtyards at the east of the corridors. Again, the two corridors are glazed. In the wine bar, there are no seats associated with this area. The bar that was relocated from the restaurant to here, it's just the bar itself has been moved, and the seating has been added to the restaurant where there is a new layout. As mentioned, the restaurant seating It was originally 120 seats. The redevelopment plan allowed for 164 total seats. We are at 148 total seats, so we are compliant. And we are also still in compliance with parking, where 107 on-site spaces were required and 53 off-site. We are at 115 on-site and 60 off-site. One final change at this floor level is at the north end by the stairs. There was a fountain there, we call it the water wall, and that has been removed. One sec. Let's see. Okay. Here's the second floor. There are really no changes. The roof plan, just again calling your attention to the fact that the two areas were moved to either side of the skylit wine vault and the corridors between the structures, and also the mechanical equipment enclosure here on the modern gallery. And again, mechanical equipment enclosures on top of the Abbey and mechanical equipment enclosures on top of the kitchen. There have been a number of changes to the landscape. I just want to mention a few of them. In addition to the entrance, there was at one point an alley of bleached London plane trees running north-south along the driveway. That actually has been removed so we could open up better views inside the site to the buildings themselves. And the landscape around the motor court has been modified with bleached trees at the corner. Some more evergreens have been added along Madison Avenue. We've touched on the fountain, and there have been additional trees added throughout the site, including here at the north area, where we removed the water wall. These trees are now the backdrop for the stairway and the view out from the building. And there have been some changes to the ADA ramps to either side of the restaurant. Those have been changed to chairlifts, and electric vehicle charging stations have been added at the southwest corner of the site. The transformer has been relocated. For the areas in the parking and the driveways, the paving's been changed to permeable asphalt, but the permeable pavers and patterning has remained at the motor court. Going to the renderings, this rendering still very much like the one that was shown at prior hearings. You're entering with a direct view to the entrance to the Abbey. The difference here is that the gates are now on the Madison Avenue side of the tree here on the left. We have the Abbey rendering. Here's a view looking facing north along the Abbey. Again, you'll see that the former LA bleached London plane trees has been removed, opening up views within the site. And then in the next slide, you can see the new fountain, as well as the central access building to the left. One thing to point out is both the central access building and the modern gallery beyond it to the north have these metal and glass canopies. Again, it's part of our effort to relate the two buildings. And here's again kind of a street view of the fountain and then the two new buildings, both with the RH logos at the parapets and then similar parapet detailing, similar detailing of the chamfered corners, and the metal and glass canopies. You'll see again the patterning in the motor court. And then finally, here's again the aerial of the project.
Thank you, Mr. Burson.
My pleasure.
Mr. Chair, we don't have any other questions for Mr. Burson.
Okay, let's go to your next witness.
Okay, we'd like to call back Mr. Seckler.
Good evening, I'm back.
Okay, Mr. Seckler, I understand you now are prepared to give planning testimony. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and you've been previously sworn as a professional planner, as an expert. And so, sir, when you're ready, please proceed.
Absolutely. And again, we're here for amended application, but just to bring the board back and the public back to how we got to this point. Again, this was a application in which there was some significant public hearings, both in the creation of the redevelopment plan as well as the site plan application that we are now seeking these minor amendments to. As part of this project, and again, one of the main, I'd say, purposes of this was to ensure that the Abbey itself and the building historical significance, the architectural treasure, would be maintained and would not be taken down, replaced by some other development. And again, I think that looking at what you've seen from the architect and from RH is that the intention of maintaining the existing historic or historic and architecturally relevant building is still there, and the design itself still keeps that the old building as the priority. We are seeking 3 amendments or 3 deviations, and our council previously mentioned them. One is related to the building design, as the applicant is proposing changing the building elevations from what was included within the redevelopment plan. That is what you heard, I would say, the large portion of the architectural testimony about. But I do believe, and you've heard the architectural testimony, that there still will be, as part of this amended application, a harmonious distinction between the new and old materials. And included within the redevelopment plan, and with really most historic preservation or adaptive reuse projects, is the fact that the new construction is supposed to complement the architectural style. It's not intended to be a copy. Historical copy is actually explicitly mentioned as not the goal as part of the redevelopment plan, and that a more modern approach that allows the original ornate Abbey structure to be the focal point is still the intended goal, and I believe we still meet as part of this amended application. And therefore, I do believe we meet the intentions of the redevelopment plan, although the actual facade that is shown in the plan has changed from from the original application to tonight. So I do believe that we do have that harmonious feature. We've simplified the building materials, and I think you've seen that with the application through all the architectural testimony. And the idea is to keep a clear hierarchy on the site, contrasting the existing building and the new structure that is being proposed here before you, and allowing the Abbey to continue to shine. So overall, again, looking at kind of the justification of the deviations relates to the building design, I believe, again, we'd be looking at C2 variances here, or creating a better plan than what was previously or intended under the redevelopment plan. And I'll get to all the overall planning proofs when we get to the end of my testimony. The second deviation we are seeking, and again, we're only seeking 3, is related to the water wall feature, or the water feature that is now being removed. It was noted that that was a feature that was obviously included because it was part of, I would say, the general RH design features that you see in a number of sites. Looking at this site, there seems like there's a more specific architecture and theme at this location in New Jersey versus, I would say, a generic water wall feature that they have at other locations. I believe the application or the removal of that is allowing other areas of the interior architecture to shine. In addition, we still maintain a water feature itself. You saw the motor court fountain that is still included. However, that water wall feature is being removed, and I don't believe there's any detriment to the overall Abbey or the design of this project by not having that water wall feature. Lastly is related to the number of seats, specifically on the restaurant aspect of the development. Again, we are compliant as it relates to the overall seats that are permitted between both wine vault and restaurant seats. That overall number would be 164 is what is permitted as the maximum. We have 148. So again, we are not creating anything that is more intense than what was envisioned. It's just that the style of seating is being moved to a restaurant only type style, as opposed to having a mix of wine vault and restaurant seats. And again, I think that with any project, especially this one, where there was a very specific redevelopment plan with very specific design features, when you create something, and you heard it in the earlier application with the Red Bulls, is that you put forth your best effort in terms of what should be in this redevelopment plan in terms of all of the possible design features. It was very, very specific in that redevelopment plan. As we develop over the years, and now it's been at least 3 years since some of those earliest public meetings, maybe even 4 years at this point, since those earliest public meetings, the design aspects, as people get ready and prepared for these construction drawings, a lot of times you notice a better design or something that may actually accentuate and accomplish a better goal in terms of the way that this site will overall look. And I believe that's what we have here. I don't believe that any deviations are substantial and create any substantial negative impacts on the redevelopment plan or the public. I do believe that from a C2 perspective, we are providing something that meets purpose I, which is the visual environment. I think that is being enhanced actually by the features that we have as part of this project. I believe purpose J, which is the conservation of historic sites. Again, this is a site that, without this redevelopment plan, this building may not be seeing this second or third life since it's had a number of uses on this property previously. So I think it's at least its third life. But again, I think that what we've done here is balanced, again, maintaining and accentuating a historic structure while also providing, a modern pair on this site as well. So I believe that is being promoted as purpose I. And then purpose A, which is health, public health, safety, and welfare and morals. Again, I think anytime that you're able to not only preserve a building, but follow a redevelopment plan such as this, I believe you're meeting those purposes of the municipal land use laws goals. In addition, looking at this overall project, I request the board to consider that when you evaluate these projects and these slight deviations, to consider not only the Kaufman versus Warren Township case, which looks at basically the basis of C2 variances, but also the Pullen versus South Plainfield case, which really gets the fact that you need to look at the totality of a project when looking at the benefits of a project, and not just not drill down to each specific waiver. You could balance the overall benefits you get from this project. And what you get here is really, again, not only the historic preservation of the building itself, but the grounds, the added landscape architecture, I think has been incredible in terms of what's been designed, but also the ability to maintain and save a number of these large mature specimen trees, and keeping the look of this site, even as it transitions into its third life, as a enhanced visual location. So again, summing up my testimony, I believe the deviations for the three new the requests we make for these three new deviations can be granted. I believe they are minimal in effect, and I believe that the architectural testimony that you heard emphasizes that even though we are changing the look of the building compared to what was in the redevelopment plan, we think this is enhancement compared to what the redevelopment plan had.
Thank you, Mr. Steckler. Mr. Chair, we don't have any questions for Mr. Steckler.
Okay, we're going to open up questions to the board. Do me a favor, when you ask your question, try to tailor it to which professional so that we can move expeditiously through the question. Ms. Murphy?
Thank you. I have a series of questions, so I hope, Mr. Lesser, you can bear with me for a moment. They may apply to both professionals, so I apologize for not being able to identify exactly which one may be responding. The first question I have is, can one of the professionals show a visual depiction of what was previously approved as the building facades.
Mr. Burson might be the
Ooh.
best witness to.
I'll tell you what, I will get that, but maybe we can move to something else while that's in process.
Okay, so what you've shown us in your collective presentations here are a focus on a new facade and a partial comparison with the old and the new, but I think it would be helpful for everyone to see the old intact and the new intact, sort of side by side. I believe that the design elevations, the facade changes are not minor, in my opinion. I feel like the current proposal is very weighty. To me, it feels like, and this is not intended to be mean in any way, but it feels like we have a Soviet era building with some glazing in the front. It's just like a big building. It's just a big building. And as I recall, the former approval, there was a lot more interest going on with the accessory build or the additional buildings. And to me, that's not a step forward. That's potentially a step back. My second area of questioning, which was not touched upon in your testimony, but I believe should be in some way, and that is the impact on the removal of certain historical elements in the Abbey. And whether that's something you can speak to or we need to call another witness, I'd like to hear some testimony on that.
So you mentioned removal of certain elements of the Abbey.
Yes, sir.
Can you be more specific?
Specifically, I'm talking about the historical windows.
Okay.
It's my opinion that by removing key elements that make that building historical in nature and worth preserving, if you continue to remove those elements, then you begin to question, are we just going to remain with a hulk of a building that has no elements left that are of historical relevance? Yeah, to me, that's a concern.
I think it should be understood two things. One, that a very serious effort, that these windows are in deteriorated condition. The glass may be intact, but the frames themselves are very, very deteriorated. An effort is being made, and we've been working with the HPC on an acceptable means of preserving these and keeping them in groups so they're not separated. And also, this is still a bit of a work in progress with the windows. I think if you've seen photos up close of some of the kind of bulging masonry and deflected frames and things like that, it's a pretty daunting task to try to preserve all of these windows.
I'd like to hear some. I'd like to hear some additional testimony on that, if I could.
Yeah, we have Dorian Yurchek, who's the gentleman who's been dealing with the Abbey and the windows, and he knows the history of the windows. We could certainly call him to address some of that. I do know a lot of the Tiffany, I don't know, I'm sorry if I'm speaking out of school, but a lot of that glass is long gone, and these were reproductions. There are a couple, I'm not use the word good, but there are a couple windows of interest, and we had spoken with the HPC and what we agreed to do, because I think part of the reason RH was going this direction as well is that the filtered light really wasn't something they wanted in the building as well. They wanted a brighter interior space. So what we agreed to do was take out all the windows, create them, preserve them, and then working with the HPC moving forward, come up with whatever way to honor those windows we and HPC thought was appropriate, either as part of a display or some other, we talked about maybe donating them to the historic organization at the county level and having them used in another appropriate way. So that's kind of the compromise that we tried to strike by not damaging or, just offloading the windows, but saving them, putting them, creating them, and then figuring out a way to honor them. That was and I'm sure if HPC wants to speak on it, they of course can tell you what their side of it was as well. But it's not something that we made a rash decision on. There was a lot of thought and discussion back and forth with the township and HPC about the windows, because we do realize that many people associate them with the historic character of the building. But again, we do have Mr. Yurchak, who could give some additional testimony.
Is
Ms.
he
Murphy?
with us tonight?
Ms. Murphy,
Yes.
would you mind if we moved on to some other board questioning and then come back to this? Because I think a few of the board members have the same feeling you do. And I think.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll be happy to wait, but I would like to speak again.
Yep. I just want to get rid of maybe some of the other testimony. We can get it out of the way and then we'll come back to that. So Mr. Benoit has his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm still trying to figure out why there were any facade changes made to begin with. I don't see how this new facade design improves what we had before. And looking at the correspondence from Mr. Phillips, what we have before us now was the fourth rendering of the applicant coming in for changes and the TCC saying, well, we don't think this is going to fly. We don't think this is going to fly. And so now we have apparently, and Mr. Phillips, please correct me if I'm wrong, the fourth rendering of what the applicant has come in with. And I'm having a hard time looking at, you have a lot of, fancy architectural terms. So I'm having a hard time seeing where, particularly on the right-hand side building, that's called it. To me, it's a building that is nice looking and maybe you might see on Route 10, for example. But the Abbey development was intended to be and made as part of the redevelopment plan a really important, significant development here on Madison Avenue. And I don't see where the changes are making it any better. I only see where they're making them less nice than they were before. So I'm having a hard time with that. And so we can talk about that also, but to get to the issue of the windows, I noticed that you didn't mention the windows and you didn't mention the ruin. Maybe Mr. Warren can chime in here, but I'm not convinced the Historic Preservation Commission has the authority on its own to decide what the applicant can do with windows if they haven't been agreed to be taken out of the building. Because if that was part of the original redevelopment plan, then it would seem to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that you first have to have approval from either the Township Committee or the Planning Board to remove those windows. And part of that approval would be to work with the HPC to see what would be done with those windows. Which windows? How many windows? Where are they located? And then and be more specific, like Ms. Murphy is talking about. Because there are over 200 windows. Maybe a lot of them are okay still. But that was part of the original site plan approval for the redevelopment plan, I should say. It's part of the redevelopment plan. Same thing with the ruin. I understand there's going to be some changes to the ruin, but that wasn't discussed tonight either. So I'm disappointed with with the redesign of the facade. I don't think it does the building any justice. And I'm really sorry to say that, because I know you put a lot of work into it. I'm just not understanding what was wrong with the original design that we all liked so much that made you want to go ahead and change it to this. So I'll yield my time to other board members who want to chime in.
Well, let's give Mr. Burson a chance to answer your question, Mr. Benoit. You asked, I think, specifically, why did you make the change when what you presented to us? And I'll let you ask it if you'd like in your own words, but I don't think you've gotten an answer yet, and I think you deserve one.
If I could just offer a few remarks. There was no doubt that there was appeal to the original design. I don't know if we can pull up that side-by-side rendering that we had. Matt, I think you had that?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
I just want to mark it for the record, if that makes, the left side is the 5th page of the hearing exhibit packet for tonight. The other one was the 30th page in the slide deck of the original application of the architecture. I could read off the, just prepare, it had dated August 16, 2021. And now I forgot what number I said, but.
Page 5 and page 30.
Okay. Right.
Okay. I think our concern was the original scheme was very appealing and very much in keeping with kind of an architectural program that RH had been developing with great success. There was a kind of a rethinking that went on to make this a more particular project. Rather than having a project where the 3 buildings were so distinct in their call it their fenestration and materials. You'll see, the brick and terracotta abbey, the brick main building with its very large horizontal aperture, and then the brick and stucco modern gallery with the Juliet balconies and the awnings. Again, as appealing as everything is and beautifully developed, we just felt that this was not a unified scheme, that these were 3 disparate buildings that really, and also that with the purchase and the importance the Abbey has for RH, it was felt that more could be done to link the 3 buildings. More could be done to sort of tease out of the Abbey an architectural vocabulary particular to this site and particular to this program. And that is what we've done. We think we have managed to make 3 buildings that relate very much of the same project, yet with the distinction between the older building and the new preserve.
Mr. Benoit, you have any other questions for the applicant?
No, thank you for that. I happen to think that the contrast of the original adds so much more to the project than the sort of the linear development on the revised project. I mean, that's how it seems to me, but I'll be happy to hear from other board members.
Mr. Jaffe had his hand up, so we'll go to his question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I'm going to echo some comments, but also respectfully disagree on some other ones. One, dealing with the windows, having been being a member of the governing body and going through this process at the township committee level, I think it was certainly my impression that everything was going to be done to preserve the integrity of those windows and the historic nature of the Abbey itself. And I believe many of the governing body members' approvals were contingent on that. And I would certainly, ask that RH continue to follow through with that in the preservation of those and saving as many of those as possible. I think if we knew what was happening now back then we'd probably have even stronger voices and stronger opinions on it. Secondly, though, I do disagree respectfully with the previous comments on the design and the facade. I see it the other way. I think actually this looks more appealing to me to actually have the consistency. Looking through some of these slides and pictures and the renderings, I like the windows and the glazing. I think it's more, it follows through with the historic nature of the building itself. Frankly, the black awnings of the original design, you can find those on Hanover Avenue at Marketplace across from ShopRite. So I think the brick details are appealing to me. I think the consistency is a good thing. And I think it's going to look pretty sharp in person. I would say, though, I would hope that the brick itself and the color schemes are as closely aligned as possible. You don't want it to be too, just slightly off where it looks like they missed the mark. But I disagree. I like the facade. And I am concerned about the windows, though. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to ask that our planning board members that continue, with no disrespect to the three that have spoken, but could we just ask questions at this point, and then we'll have an opportunity for comments afterwards? So I'll just ask you to focus on the questions so we can get through the applicants' witnesses. Thank you. Mr. Quillen. Mr. Quillen, I believe you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I have a couple of questions. One is, I read the report from the PCC, Mr. Phillips's report about multiple iterations of the revision. And one of the things he mentioned in the first go around was that the modern wing would have dark tinted windows. Is that accurate? Do you intend for the modern wing to have dark tinted windows?
I'm not quite sure. I mean, the degree to which they will be more tinted than windows normally are. An effort has been made to open up the view into the buildings. And one of the things I wanted to mention was, the renderings don't convey it, but when the lights are on and you see the furniture galleries within, it's a very inviting kind of array. So, we can address the tinting of the windows in more specifics.
Has there been consideration of making the external appearance of the windows across the three buildings roughly similar, so that a person wouldn't say, gee, there's some older windows on the left and some dark windows on the right?
I think that's inevitable. I think the leaded glass, stained glass windows are just always going to look different.
Well, I thought you were getting rid of all the stained glass windows. Is that incorrect?
Well, we're looking at it, but again, the size, the scale of those openings is completely different.
I know that. I'm sorry. I'm talking about the quality of the glass itself and the extent to which the expanses of glass that a person would see from the street or halfway between the street and the buildings would look different, such that a person would say, this is modern tinted glass as opposed to the older clear glass.
I think that would be inevitable.
Okay, could you tell me what the height of the modern wing is, including the equipment enclosure on the top of the building?
Sure. Let me see if I can get that measurement for you. While I'm getting that, let me just see. Okay, I'll have to get that number for you.
Could you roughly say how much taller the modern wing is than the Abbey?
Let me get you an exact measurement.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Quillen, do you have any questions for any of the other witnesses while he's looking for that exact number?
Yes, I have a question about how much farther forward toward Madison Avenue the modern wing is relative to the Abbey. I believe it's about 25 feet. I did that in a very rough way looking at the diagrams, but I just wanted to ask about that.
So maybe the engineer can answer that question?
You're referring to the setback from the modern wing? I believe it is from Madison Avenue itself. It's about 154 feet from Madison Avenue. And you want to know the existing Abbey building is about 118 feet.
My question is really a little bit different. If you draw a line, across the front of the Abbey, and then draw a line across the front of the modern wing, those would be two parallel lines. How far apart would those lines be?
Gotcha. So you're not referring to off of Madison Avenue, because that Madison Avenue has a, kind of goes away from the buildings themselves.
Yeah, sure.
That's what we would have done from a zoning perspective. Let me get you the measurement from a building perspective. Hold on.
George, you're stumping the audience here. Mr. Burson, have you?
It's just about 10. The answer is just about 10 feet further out than the Abbey. If you're standing on the Abbey building, and the other building would stick out about 10 feet. If you're at the basically front of the Abbey.
I think that's the central building that sticks out about 10 feet, and then the modern wing sticks out about another 10 or 15 feet. No?
Get my measurement here. Trying to get that measurement.
Is the board member's question whether or not this creates a deviation, or is it just an aesthetic question?
It's an aesthetic question related to the massing of the modern wing, and it relates to comments that I would like to make later about the appearance of the modern wing.
Okay.
And I'm kind of more in Mayor Jorfe's camp than I am in other people's camp in terms of the appearance, but I'll hold my comments for later as was requested.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry, but we do have the height, including the mechanical enclosure, is 42 feet 6 inches, but I don't have the height relative to the Abbey.
Okay, I am curious about that because the comparison of the two buildings, just a visual comparison, to me is important in terms of how the buildings, what kind of impression the new building makes, especially with its rather large mass. Okay, that's all I had for now. Thank you.
And I can give you the answer again of if I could share my screen, I could show you what I was measuring. If that helps.
Mr. Slade, can you share screen?
I'm going to share it. This is the site plan. This was submitted obviously as part of the application. It is sheet C. Let's lock in my view here. C4. It is about just 10.5 feet from the furthest out point of the Abbey, which is what I'm pointing to here on the left-hand side of the page. It's about vertically about 10.5 feet to be aligned with this portion of the modern wing. That's about 10 feet.
I see. Okay. So you're using the portico. I was thinking
Yes.
about the main part of the building. Okay. I think we agree roughly. Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Mr. Quillen. Ms. Wilson, you had your hand up?
Yes, I did. I have one question for Mr. Seckler and one for Mr. Burson. So for Mr. Burson, I thought I read on one of the maps and in the packets that there was an increase in the outdoor dining space of about 1,000 square feet. And I was wondering if you were going to be commenting on that. Could you comment on that, please? where is it? And am I correct in that figure?
No, there was no increase. There was a slight increase in the display space to either side of the wine bar. About, I think it was under 1,000 square feet. Because of the deletion of those two design consultation areas that was given back over to garden.
Yeah, and Miss Wilson, there is no outdoor dining.
I thought there was. It wasn't, or outdoor. I'm gonna have to look back. I know I saw something, so I'm not remembering correctly what I saw earlier.
Yeah.
I'll come back to that if I locate it.
Ms. Wilson, I believe there's outdoor displays during the testimony. I think they may have confused us. I caught it the same way you did. I think they're talking about the outdoor displays.
Okay. All right. That could be. All right. And then my question for Mr. Sackler connects with the comments on page 6 of Mr. Phillips' report. And if you, Mr. Sackler, could go back to the I don't know what the name of it was, showing the driveway. It says the alignment of the entry drive to the side parking lot along the internal southern side lot line has been shifted relative to the approved plans. I was wondering if you could highlight what that shift or what that exact change is.
Sure. And again, if you want, I could try to bring up before and after, but
yes, that would be great.
Let me try to get that up there. Just give me a second. Pull the right page up. Okay. Sharing my screen. Okay, so on the left-hand side was that sheet 6 from the packet that has been prepared today.
Mm-hmm.
And what we had done is, and I'll show on the, I guess on the right-hand side, this was the previously approved site plan. This was, I believe, C4, and this was dated September 10th, 2021 for the record. So the point that we're looking at is where the parking aisle on the left-hand side of the page starts to meet the front. It used to take a very, I would say, standard radius and, very meeting almost like two vertical and horizontal points of the aisle, and we kind of just met them with a straight radii. You could see here it bows a little bit further closer to Madison Avenue to avoid a number of the specimen trees here, and then also kind of takes a little bit more of a, I'd say, a leisurely turn, a little more of aesthetically pleasing turn, as opposed to, I would say, a standard kind of fair parking lot where it went, meets at right angles. So that's the change that's been made, again, to try to maintain a number of the existing trees along that portion of the lot.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful. And just for the record, I like the earlier design better.
Thank you. We said we were going to have a soft stop at 10 o'clock. We have Mr. Bai's got a question. If there's no other board members after Mr. Bai, we'll go back to Ms. Murphy's question. We'll bring up that other witness, and we'll squeeze this out to 10:15. And then, Mr. Vitola, you're going to have to continue this at another time for the public to ask questions of your witnesses, and then for final summation and comments from the public, as well as comments from the board. We also have questions from our board professionals. We'll see where we are at 10:15. So let me go to Mr. Bai.
Yes, okay. Just a couple of quick questions following up with Mr. Quillens, who asked, the relative distances between the front of the building and heights. My reading is, and I looking at this, he asked, what the specific numbers were, but the height of the modern building has not changed. Is that correct?
Correct.
And the footprint, basically, it's in the same place it was before, as I recall. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Vitola, before I'm sorry, Mr. Bai, did you have another question, Mr. Bai?
Oh, that's all. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. I'd like to go back to Ms. Murphy's questions, and you had suggested that you have an expert that you'd like to put on.
Yeah, it's Dorian Yurchuk. He's on, I believe, as a panelist.
Okay, can he
spell his name?
Yeah,
business address.
we need to see him as well because Mr. Warner has to swear him in. And
There he is.
very good.
My eyes are bad. It starts with a Y. Dorian, can you spell your last name, please?
My last name is Yurchuk.
Thank you. Business address?
118 West 22nd Street, New York, New York.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear? I could see it. Thank you. Do you swear to God or affirm the testimony about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, Mr. Bartolo.
Yeah, and Mr. Yurchuk, I don't know if you've had the benefit of hearing the entire presentation, but there's been a question. There's been a question raised by one of the board members about the stained glass windows that are currently installed at the Abbey, and I know you've looked at these windows and I think understand their condition. If you could just provide a summary for the board about the windows and what your assessment of those windows are, and maybe even get into why removing them, creating them, and saving them is a good strategy here. Go ahead.
Sure. So first of all, there's a lot more deterioration to the window areas than meets the eye. There's first of all, the deterioration of some of the leaded glass itself in terms of warping of the lead and glazing units, but also these are wood frame windows that are fitted into masonry openings with masonry mullions with steel framing to stabilize the assemblies. And for years, the steel has been rusting, which in turn fractures the masonry, allows more water. So we have, first of all, the rotting of the wood frames, sash weight pockets, etc. Then we have the corrosion and weakening of the steel frames that will have to be reinforced. And in order to do that, these windows would need to be removed so that we can reinforce the steel so that we can replace the broken masonry. And it's not likely that the windows would survive the removal, and B, be able to be fitted back within their original frames. And second, there's there's issues of lead paint. There's issues with stabilization of the windows after the reconstruction. And then there's the question as to how to incorporate these historic leaded glass windows into an energy efficient glazing system without long-term damage to the leaded glass itself, or the implementation of secondary glazing that would detract from the appearance of the original glass. So those are some of the technical reasons. I don't know how much you want me to get into some of the design reasons at this point.
How about the stained glass itself and the historic nature of it? Could you just address maybe that part of it?
Mr. Chairman, this is Board Member Benoit. Could the witness provide his credentials, please?
Yeah, and thank you, Mr. Benoit. We sort of rushed into it here, but
right.
Mr. Yurchuk, can you just describe your professional qualifications for the board? Maybe just tell everyone about your education, your training, what makes you qualified to testify about the historic aspects of the Abbey windows.
Yes. So I have an architecture degree from the Cooper Union in New York City, and I have a history of architecture degree from McGill University in Montreal. And for the last 24 years, I have been working in historic restoration in and around New York City with the firm of Walter Meldon Architects.
And are you an architect?
I am a registered architect in the state of New York.
Registered in the state of New York. That's okay. And you're working together with architects who are licensed in the state of New Jersey,
Yes, sir.
okay. Would Mr. Burson be one of those? I thought he said.
Also, one of the principals in my firm is registered in the state of New Jersey.
Okay, that's sufficient under the statutes for purposes of accepting him as an expert in the field of architecture. And I guess you've heard the specifics, expertise with respect to historic preservation, but I'll defer to the chair.
Yeah, I think we'll accept him as a witness. Mr. Benoit, did you have any questions specific to his background that you'd like to ask?
No, I just wanted for the record that it be in there.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe we can allow the witness to continue to answer Mr. Vitolo's questions, and then I'd like to get back to Miss Murphy for her to complete her questions.
Yeah, and Mr. Yurchuk, I think where I left off is, there's been some comments from the board about the historic nature of the glass itself, the stained glass windows. I know you've looked at them. Do you have an opinion on, their value, their history? Could you just tell the board a little bit more about them?
The glass is historic, in so far as it dates back to the time of the construction of the building. The designer, I believe his name was Otto Henneke, was less known than other stained glass artists from the times, but he's definitely known. But it's the interesting thing here is the vast difference in the glass, the stained glass in various from room to room, from one side of the building to the other. So you have simple diamond shaped patterns or expanded diamond shaped patterns of the clear leaded glass. Then you have windows that are a hybrid of clear and stained leaded glass. And then you have windows that are completely translucent with no transparent pieces, many of which are painted on with additional decoration, making it impossible to see through at all. And it's from one standpoint, on a room by room basis, it's a theme within each room. But from the exterior, there's a little bit less continuity within the building itself, let alone compared to the other buildings.
Thank you, Mr. Yurchuk. I don't know, Mr. Chair, if we want to go back to Ms. Murphy, if she has specific questions for Mr. Yurchuk.
Unless you have specific questions for Mr. Yurchuk, I would like to do that.
Sure. And Mr. Yurchuk, you had mentioned getting into a little more detail about the design and the reasons why RH is moving in this direction. I assume your answer that you just gave about the different glass in each room and how it affects the theme of the project, is that, am I summarizing what your opinion is on that?
Well, that and the ability to see into and out of the spaces. My understanding is that the site is designed as a interconnected series of spaces and views, and especially some of the more involved stained glass windows would not work with that. The ability to see through the windows themselves.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Chair, if you want to turn it over to Ms. Murphy.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Murphy, I'm sorry I cut you off before. I wanted to just get through maybe some of the other testimony, but it sounds like this is appropriate at this point. If you can continue your questioning.
Thank you. I understand. I'm just going to say a couple of comments, if I may, or do I have to just ask questions right now?
I think it'd be better if you asked the question so we can let this witness go.
Okay, so I don't understand what Mr. Yurchuk said about different buildings. The historical windows are in the Abbey. And I'm not sure he mentioned being different buildings. And it was my understanding, I'm thinking that probably the rest of the board would agree, and I'll verify that with this witness, I suppose, that the historical elements of the building were going to be preserved, not just the windows, but some the ruins and whatever. And that was the basis for the prior approval, both from the Township Committee and the Planning Board. And now we come to find out that perhaps none of that is going to, come to reality. I'm just curious to know how we got so far off where we thought we were in terms of the preservation of the historical elements, which is what makes this building worth preserving to begin with. And number two, I still am not understanding why is there such a dramatic difference between the original facade that was approved and the facade that we're seeing now. I can't wrap my mind around it. It's so dramatically different.
So Mr. Vitolo, you could have any one of your witnesses answer that question if it's not specific to Mr. Yurcheck, maybe Mr. Burson, but it sounds like this is a theme that I think you need to answer us and give us the comfort level we're looking for.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I mean, there was a question about what we're required to do under the approval. I think that's appropriate for me to address. The redevelopment plan didn't require us to retain the stained glass windows. Nonetheless, I do understand what Board Member Murphy is saying, and there was an understanding we would, restore the Abbey and retain as much as was feasible. And I think that's, I think we even used those words during the first time around. What happened here is we looked at the windows. You heard that from Mr. Yurcheck, and it was determined that keeping them in place and slapping a storm window over it wasn't appropriate, and they just didn't fit within the RH design for the project. Nonetheless, we're obviously not wrapping up this evening, so we certainly will go back and look at it, because it does seem that Ms. Murphy raises some questions. So we will certainly go back and take a look at it. And with respect to the differences in the facades, Mr. Burson has given testimony. I understand that maybe you would like some additional testimony. We can look at either having someone from RH or another member of the team provide some testimony to provide some greater detail on that issue. It's not, look, it's a design. People, it sounds like, and I told the client this, when you're sitting with a design for a year or more, you really grow to be comfortable with it. And when you see a new design, it's like, boom, you need some time to settle with it. So, I'm not shocked. There's some people who are offering a different opinion on the look of it. Nonetheless, we could, at this next, I'm assuming, Mr. Chairman, you're going to carry us. I can have some additional witnesses and testimony going into the thinking of the change, more testimony on the change. That you heard some, maybe you could hear some from the developer themselves on the change as well.
We're going to need to come back because we have the public that has questions, and I'm sure it may be for all of your witnesses. I'd just like to get through the board questioning. It doesn't look like any of the board members have a question. I think Ms. Murphy does have a question that you still haven't answered, but you're telling us you're going to come back and give us another shot at answering her question, and we really appreciate that.
Yep.
And I'll ask, I see Ms. Wilson's hand up.
Yeah, I'll be quick. The question I was asking about the outdoor patio, it's on the site plan. Maximum outdoor patio area goes from approved of 9,600 to 10,500. And where does that happen on the plan?
I believe Mr. Seckler covered that. It's the two areas that were formerly little bump outs to the center building that are now landscaped areas. That's the additional square footage.
Okay.
Great. I'm just going to ask if our board professionals have any questions. Mr. Phillips?
Yeah, I have a question for Mr. Sackler.
Sure.
So this has to do with the parking requirement. You I think went through the number of spaces that are required per the revised plan and the number of spaces provided, and there's I guess a 9-space cushion and so forth. Can you just go through what the approved plan, the number of spaces required and provided? And I may have a follow-up question based on your response.
Certainly. So the approved plan had an 87 space requirement for the retail portion and had a 48 space requirement for the restaurant portion, which led to a total of 135 required spaces, and we had 175 total. In addition, 115 of that was required to be on site. Sorry, 102 were required to be on site, and we had 115. So we had an excess both in the total number of spaces and the total number of on-site spaces.
So here's what I'm grappling with, Matt, and maybe it's just a mathematical thing. We're reducing the total number of seats from what was approved, correct?
Well, if you remember the original application, we came before the board and we had actually 120 restaurant seats and 44 wine vault seats. And I believe at some point during that testimony, the wine vault seats went away during the night of the application. So the plan may have said 44 wine vault seats, but I believe if you check the resolution, those 44 wine vault seats are not listed in the resolution. We had the ability to have 44, but I think there was some discussion that the night that the vote was happening and we removed them.
Okay, and so that would explain the lesser parking requirement. Can you just, and probably we all may want to take a look at the prior resolution, but I just want to confirm that indeed that was the case. So that aligns with those fewer parking spaces required under the approved plan.
Repeat that again, Paul, sorry.
In other words, that I just want to make sure that in the prior resolution that those wine spaces were eliminated so that it's consistent with your representation of what the approved number of spaces were relative to what you're proposing now, because that would probably explain it. But I just want to be clear that that's what's in the resolution, because that's part of the record and that's part of what was approved.
Understood, yes.
Okay, and Mr. Chairman, the only other question I have, and it probably, this can wait, but so I'll throw it out, and I don't know who's the best to answer it, whether it's Mr. Burson, whether it's a representative of RH, but if, I guess to go back to the issue of the additional restaurant seating vis-a-vis the original seating for the wine bar, what's sort of the logic and rationale behind that? Because we did spend some time in crafting the redevelopment plan and basically providing a certain number of restaurant seats and a certain number of wine seats, and now it's an increase in all restaurant seats. So I think there should just be something on the record as to kind of what drove that, if you will.
Mr. Vitale, do you have someone who can answer that question?
Yes, we'll have someone to answer that question at the next hearing.
Okay, then I'm going to ask Mr. Warner if he has any questions.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The applicant will, in the event there's an approval, applicant will stipulate that all conditions of the prior approval will carry forward to the extent not inconsistent therewith.
Yes.
Okay. And I'd note we have an April 8 report from Mr. Kissinger, I guess. And I just want to make sure that all the items, if they have been addressed tonight, are addressed by next time by Mr. Sackler. And we also have the May 12 report of the Historic Preservation Commission as well. which certainly the issues were addressed, the agreement was referred to, but again, I just want to make sure we have all those items. I don't know if we have a representative of the Historic Preservation Commission here this evening or anticipated to be here next evening.
Yes.
But that we do have those
Carol
two.
Barkin is here.
Carol Barkin is here, Mr. Warner.
Okay, well, there, I would hope then, Carol, well, I'm sure everyone will have an opportunity to ask questions and speak next time, including Ms. Barkin. And then I guess that's all I had, at least for now, recognizing there'll be another chance.
So do we have a date to continue this hearing to?
Sonia, what's available next couple?
I have June 6th. Does that work for you, Mr. Vitale?
Do we have anything else on that night?
No.
Not at all? A completely empty night? How'd that happen?
The only thing that I have is the resolution for Anna management.
Okay, gotcha.
We'll take it.
What took you so long? And then, okay, hopefully, well, I'm sure we'll have a quorum and hopefully all the members of the public and Ms. Barkin can make it next time.
Mr. Vitale, you'll have all your witnesses back in case, so this way the public has a fair opportunity to question them.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I do have a question, and I'm not sure, Mr. Werner will weigh in here, but given that we're all talking about design and it's very sort of subjective, based on how do you feel and what have you, we heard from a couple board members, their thoughts. It would really help me to know if it's possible to do a straw just to see where everyone's head is right now on the new design. So we have some guidance for the next meeting. I don't know if that's something.
Yeah, I think that's fair. We're willing to do that for you. You want to pose the question and then we'll poll the, again, not non-binding to all the board members, but they can give the yay or nay. Again, we'll hold comments till the next hearing. I promised we'd be done by 10. I'm going to get fired, but we're close. So would you like to pose your question?
Frank?
Yeah, no, the question is, I guess based on the current design before the board, is it something that you like? I mean, I don't want to say you're going to vote for it or anything like that, but is it something that you could support?
So board members will answer yes, they like it, or no, they don't like it.
Yeah, and again, just to be clear, since it sounds like the ultimate issue type question that we lawyers, we use that term, the ultimate issue, but this is simply a polling. This is not binding, and this is not to determine whether or not the board is even preliminarily considering whether it's going to approve the amendments to the application, the amendments to the preliminary and final site plan approval or not. It's simply, are you favorable to the proposed facade changes or not? Correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay, Ms. Santiago, would you please give us a roll?
For polling purposes only.
For polling purposes only. For polling purposes only, and these are non-binding, so if you change your mind because you fall in love or fell out of love, I guess we can accept that.
Okay. So the polling is for?
This is for the applicant to get a sense of whether or not the individual board members like the new design or dislike the new design.
Okay, here we go. Mr. Quillen.
I always get to go first, right?
Yeah.
So I'll just say, overall, I think I slightly prefer the new design. I have a lot more things that I could say, but I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. How about Ms. Murphy?
I think the facade design needs more work. I prefer the older version, but there may be some compromise that could be achieved.
Mr. Bai?
I like everything about the new plans, except I'm kind of on the fence about the facade itself. I mean, the other changes are really nice, I think, and well done, but the facade, I currently prefer the old one, but maybe I'm not used to the new one yet.
Ms. Wilson,
I like the old one better.
Mr. Jorfi,
New one.
Ms. Van Order,
I also like the new one better.
Mr. Benoit.
Well, I prefer the old one, but like Linda says, I'm not stopping this project because of this, but maybe there's room for improvement. Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Nunn,
I like the new proposal.
Mr. Alesso.
I'm going to abstain.
You're gonna abstain from a polling question?
Yes, I think it's in my best interest.
Okay. All right. Well, there, you got your polling.
Mr. Vitolo?
Yeah, look, thank you so much, everybody. That really is going to help us in having our conversations before the next meeting. It really will. So we appreciate it. We appreciate the time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your efficiency, and we'll see you on June 6th.
Great. We're looking forward to seeing you on June 6th.
Okay. Thank you.
And just to round out the announcement, time, date, and place, as they taught me in municipal land use law school.
Can I just ask a question before we go? We didn't poll Flowers and McKay, did we?
No, they're alternate members. We did not call them now.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Should I?
It's described, polling is polling. So
Yeah, I think it'd be appropriate to poll both of them.
They can't vote, but they can poll.
Oh, okay, so
You
Mr.
put them on
Flowers.
the spot too.
I'm in the Rick By camp.
On the fence?
That's a yes, but the way he summed it up was my thoughts exactly.
Oh, currently prefer, wait.
That's it. That's in the new camp.
Oh, no, okay, he had it, okay.
How about Miss McKay?
I like the new version. I like both, really.
Great. Okay, thank
Okay.
you. Mr. Warner, is it okay for us to let the applicant complete and we move on?
Yeah, we're just gonna, Mr. Warner is just gonna say that this matter is being carried without further notice to June 6th, Sonia.
That is
at
correct.
7 PM, still anticipated to be a remote access Zoom meeting. No further notice, so this is your notice. And Mr. Vitolo, if you could just send me an email confirming that the time to act is extended through the month of June, if you'd be kind enough.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Warner.
Thank you.
Great. We're going to move on to other legislative matters. Ms. Wilson?
No report this evening.
Okay, Mr. Giarfi?
No report.
Excellent. We'll now open up the floor for public commentary on anything but this application. Do I see any public comments? Excellent. We will then close the session and thank everyone for joining us this evening.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to.
Oh.
Future applications,
Drafts.
the only thing we have scheduled is a continuation of this hearing. No other applications have been scheduled.
Excellent. Okay, motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Against, we don't need a roll call for this. All in favor, say aye.
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 All that would like to stay, say no. Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Thanks,
Good
everyone.
night.
Good night.
Night. Yes.
Jim?